A very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Jones and Frost.
Yeah, with Anna and Wilf. Good morning from me as well. Let's get to it.
Donald Trump says negotiations with Iran are going extremely well, even as he considers seizing the country's oil.
Prime Minister holds talks with fuel bosses as supply fears grow over the ongoing blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
Farmers warn of the looming spectre of food shortages if the strait remains closed.
Also today, we're going to speak to Esther Zhai, the mother of murdered teenager Brianna Zhai, and she says that social media stole her daughter's childhood and backs a ban for under-16s.
3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition.
And the countdown is on to the first manned mission to the moon in more than 5 decades.
Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. So the war in the Middle East continues to escalate and there's a real sense of crisis today. Oil prices have again surged above $100 a barrel as Iran's stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz remains. Here, the Prime Minister is holding roundtable talks later on this morning with energy and shipping bosses to try to discuss the crisis and find some solutions. And there are warnings from food industry about shortages because of the blockade.
Wider tensions in the region are intensifying. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces an expansion of his invasion of southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says his team are negotiating extremely well with Tehran and is confident a ceasefire deal could be reached soon. The US president also told the Financial Times, though, he's considering seizing Iran's oil, a move which would likely see the US occupy Kharg Island. Here's what Trump had to say overnight.
We are negotiating with them directly and indirectly. We have emissaries, but we also are dealing directly. And as you know, they've agreed to send 8 boats 2 days ago, and then they added another 2, so it was 10 boats. And now today they gave us as a tribute, I don't know, I can't define it exactly, but they gave us, I think out of a sign of respect, 20 boats of oil, big boats of oil, going through the Hormuz Strait. And that's taking place starting tomorrow morning. Over the next couple of days, a lot of boats. And I would only say that we're doing extremely well in that negotiation, but you never know with Iran because we negotiate with them and then we always have to blow them up.
Well, despite Donald Trump's confidence about the ceasefire talks, Iran has announced that it'll be targeting the private homes of US and Israeli officials in the Middle East. It's a move they say is retaliation for US and Israeli attacks on residential areas.
In light of the malicious actions and terrorist measures of the American Zionist enemies and their targeting of residential homes of the Iranian people in various cities, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran will, in retaliatory action, target the residences of American and Zionist regime commanders and political officials in the region and in the occupied territories.
Well, in the wider region, a UN peacekeeper has been killed in Lebanon. The UN says one other peacekeeper was also critically injured in an explosion in the south of the country. It's not yet known where it was launched from, but the United Nations interim force in Lebanon is investigating and says deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law. Let's bring in Sally Lockwood. She's in Dubai for us. Sally, good morning to you once again. What is the picture from the region of this? Are we escalating or are peace talks actually yielding anything or not?
Good morning to you both, Wilf. Certainly, it feels like very little has changed here. We are more than 4 weeks into a war that the UAE never wanted. And yesterday, we had our heaviest day of bombardment in a long time. And you just need to look at the news coming out of other countries, such as Kuwait this morning, reporting an attack on their energy infrastructure and a desalination plant, which, of course, is extremely concerning because this region is extremely reliant on desalination plants for drinking water, and Iran has threatened to target those if America goes after their power plants, as Donald Trump has been threatening. We've also, of course, seen the Houthis in Yemen joining this war over the weekend, attacking Israel. And there's a lot of concern that they could exacerbate the economic situation when it comes to commercial shipping, disrupting shipping in the Red Sea, as well as what we're already seeing here in the Strait of Hormuz. So, yes, it does feel that potentially this is moving in an escalatory trajectory, because as well as the rhetoric that you're hearing coming out of Washington, no matter how much Donald Trump tries to talk up indirect and direct talks with the Iranians, he's also saying, you know, in the same breath that he could take their oil facilities on Kharg Island, which would be extremely escalatory, and it's very inflammatory in terms of rhetoric. So, you know, we've got that on the one hand, and then we've also got the troop movements. So 3,500 Marines and sailors have now made their way here to the region from the Sea of Japan. Another 2,500 Marines are on their way. The 82nd Airborne Division are being deployed here, paratroopers. And we understand the Pentagon is also considering deploying 10,000 ground troops. And Iran has come out and said, well, if you do that, we'll be ready for you. If you try and start a ground offensive here, whether it's on, you know, islands between here and Iran or on the Iranian mainland, which we think is potentially less likely, Iran has said, you know, we're ready for you. Iran always responds with a retaliatory threat any time there's any sort of escalation by America or by Israel. We've seen a university hit in Tehran over the weekend, and Iran has responded saying, OK, we're now going to target American universities in the region. And, you know, there's a lot of concern. There are a lot of American-affiliated universities, including one here in Dubai. And I've heard from a staff member there who said, you know, we were due to return to in-person learning this week. That's no longer happening. We're working from home. You know, these are very real consequences for people living and working in this region. Every time there's some sort of inflammatory statement or escalatory attack against Iran. And I think we're just going to have to wait and see. As I've been saying to you before, Wilf, it very much feels like we're holding our breath. It doesn't feel like the war is moving in the right direction.
Well, yes, and Sally, we heard a very confident Donald Trump on Air Force One overnight, talking about the US position and obviously very confident in it. But is there a sense there that this war is spiralling out of his control?
I mean, I think there is a sense that Donald Trump did not expect this standoff from Iran when it came to the Strait of Hormuz, holding the world to ransom when it comes to the energy flow, which normally we see through the Strait of Hormuz out from the Gulf to the rest of the world, around 20% of the world's crude oil. And Donald Trump has time and time again tried to come up with some sort of solution, whether it's bringing together an international coalition to police the Strait of Hormuz, or whether it's threatening Iran to target their power plants if they don't reopen it. Nothing has worked. Tehran does not appear to be in a mood to capitulate. And even if Donald Trump tries to dress up these 20 tankers that are now being allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, it seems to be an agreement between Pakistan and Iran. It doesn't look like America has been involved in this agreement at all. And 20 tankers is just a drop in the ocean, no pun intended. It's usually 138 tankers that would be going through the Strait of Hormuz every day. And Wilf, you'll be able to comment better than me on this, but, you know, for a time, we saw Donald Trump, he was able to steady the markets and steady the oil prices with comments that he made about the war. And that doesn't seem to be the case. It does feel potentially like, the world and the markets are losing confidence in Donald Trump's control over this situation. And meanwhile, Tehran realised that they're in a strong position when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. And I guess there is a concern right now that this war could escalate, but there is an opportunity for Tehran to, you know, not overplay their hand here and to negotiate with America while they are in a position of strength to get sanction relief in order for, you know, the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened in return. But it's not clear if Tehran is in any mood to do that. There's zero trust when it comes to Washington and negotiations, and they're potentially feeling quite vengeful after being attacked twice now while negotiating with Washington in the last year.
Sally, great stuff as always, live in Dubai for us, mentioning, of course, the markets and the impact on oil prices. Let's have a look at what oil prices are doing this morning. And essentially, they are not buying into the framing that peace talks are going well, and they are buying into the prospect of this continuing and possibly escalating. Just rewind the clock to this time last week. Oil prices on the international gauge on Brent hit 114, and a few hours later, we saw President Trump issue that Truth Social post to say there's going to be peace talks, and that really pulled oil prices back. Well, that was this time last Monday. His post an hour or so later pulled oil prices back, and then we've steadily increased since then, most notably late last week and on Friday in particular, adding another 2% this morning. Brent is at 115. So that hope about peace talks that we got this time a week or so ago has very much evaporated. We're moving higher once again, despite all the rhetoric that talks might be going well. And of course, we're still up sharply since the start of the war and since the start of the year. That's a 6-month chart, just a quick snapshot over 5 years, because we're pretty much at a 4-year high. We're at about a 3.5, 4-year high. And obviously back here, you get to see where oil, this is oil prices, not gas prices, where oil prices got at the start and during the Russia-Ukraine war. 130 was the peak, 125 was held a couple of times. As I said, we're up at 115 this morning. Haven't seen that since sort of a month into the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, giving you the context of where we are on oil prices. Borrowing costs for the UK. I've picked the 10-year borrowing cost for us today, which did once again hit 5% on Friday. It was a torrid day once again for the UK bond market on Friday. We're awaiting the open. This isn't updated today. It opens at 8 a.m. We're awaiting the open this morning. But once again on Friday, we briefly touched 5%. We closed at about 4.9%. But this level, it's an 18-year high, excuse me. A high since the global financial crisis, not since 2008 that we've been up at 5% for the 10-year borrowing cost. So we're watching that closely at the open as well. Just want to finish on the chart of the NASDAQ. This is the US tech-heavy stock indices. Why am I showing this? Because on Friday it fell into what's known as correction territory. It's now fallen 10% from its recent high, which was in October. In fact, it's fell 12.5% since that moment. So that's a headline. It's a bad headline for the US president to see that the stock market is in correction territory. But it's not really still corrected that much. That was Liberation Day when he announced his tariffs. It fell 11% in 2 days and ultimately fell 19% before he U-turned on that particular policy. Obviously rallied pretty sharply since then. So, yeah, we've kind of fallen. And we've fallen enough that people will be feeling a bit, down 12% since October. But we haven't fallen anything like as much as we did. That sharp fall in just a matter of days after he announced tariffs last April that then ultimately led him to U-turn on his policy. So the pressure's building, if you look at the US stock market on the US president. But it's clearly not built enough, Anna, for him to decide to drop this policy altogether. No,
absolutely. So pressure on the American president, but inevitably pressure here as well, because those rising oil prices are going to feed in over time and affect all of us potentially. So later this morning, Keir Starmer is hosting a round table of fuel industry leaders at Downing Street to talk about all of this.
Yeah, and so the leaders are going to come from oil, gas, energy, shipping, and also the financial and insurance sectors. Let's talk about all of this with Lucy to see what might be on the agenda, who else will be at their meeting, and is this just a little bit of a chit-chat to show he's doing something, or are we expecting hard action to come from there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We've seen a number of these kind of round tables, haven't we? A few weeks ago, petrol bosses were dragged into number 10 for a meeting as well. The government is very clearly wanting to reassure people. We're in parliamentary recess now, where MPs generally go back to their constituencies, a bit of an Easter holidays type thing. The government today saying, we are conscious that this is having an impact on the cost of living and we are going to do something about it. As you say, bosses from Shell, BP, finance bosses, HSBC, Lloyds of London, military bosses as well, giving an update on the situation. I think the government wants to discuss how the public sector can work with them to try and bring down the cost of living. But again, I mean, given that this situation is broadly outside of their control, what can the government actually do? I suppose the question will now go on to things like, I mean, will the government look to impose restrictions on fuel, speed limits? At the moment, they are very much saying, keep calm, carry on, fill up your car, book your holidays, don't worry about jet fuel shortages or anything like that. So I think this is an optics thing. The government is saying they are looking at all scenarios. At the moment, we don't really have a huge amount of detail about what they will actually do.
No, and they've given signals about energy costs in the future, haven't they? But they haven't actually produced the policy, but they've kind of implied they'll be targeted if we do have to support people if costs do get too high.
Yeah, I think what they're doing is they feel that time is on their side. So they've announced that immediate support for customers who use heating oil. But when it comes, you've got the majority of energy customers will be protected by the price cap from April until June, when that resets at the beginning of July. So the government is kind of waiting and hoping that maybe the situation will ease before it has to intervene. I think we are moving towards a scenario now where the government knows there are enough warnings from economic experts to say that they are going to have to do something about it. But I think they're holding off from making any significant financial commitments just yet.
And holding off on that fuel duty push that the Tories are suggesting.
Yeah, again, they think that they've got time enough.
Fuel duty as is planned.
They've got a few months before they need to make that decision, I think.
That's great stuff. Thanks so much. Of course, we'll be talking to the government shortly, to Emma Reynolds and to Claire Coutinho, the Shadow Energy Minister for the Tories later on. Now, a fugitive gunman who has been on the run for more than half a year in Australia is believed to have been shot dead by police.
Yeah, this is Desi Freeman, who allegedly killed 2 police officers in the state of Victoria last August before fleeing into bushland, which has led to a major manhunt. Molly's got more. She's with us now. Hi there, Molly. This is something we might not have heard so much about in this country, but I think it's obsessed people in Australia, hasn't it? This months-long manhunt.
Yeah, nearly 7 months now. This is a man that, had been evading justice, essentially, for more than 6 months, nearly 7 months, after he allegedly killed those 2 police officers in August last year. What followed, as you say, was this massive manhunt involving, the police say, pretty much every authority in Australia and New Zealand as well. You can see on your screens now it was a rural area. He vanished, basically, into this huge area of bushland, and an offer, actually, of more than £500,000 the police were offering as a reward to try and find him. Now they clearly have. It's understood that officers shot and killed him after this long standoff in northeast Victoria, not far actually from where that first incident happened in August last year, after what police described as a cross between a container where it's thought that he was sort of hiding and a caravan. At this stage, the police say it's understood that it is him, but they haven't gone through that formal identification process yet. They said that it was their aim for him to give himself up to surrender, but clearly that didn't happen. We've got a clip now from the Chief Commissioner at Victoria Police.
The very first people to be made aware of the outcome of this operation were the families of the officers tragically killed on the 26th of August, and all of the members that were involved on that day. What I can say, should it be confirmed that the deceased is Freeman, this brings closure to what was a tragic and terrible event. It did result from a standoff, the deployment of tactics. He then exited the building. There was an opportunity for him to surrender peacefully, which he did not.
So what do we know about this man?
Yeah, it's worth just reminding people, isn't it? Because many people here won't be familiar with who he is. But he was a pretty notorious criminal and sort of widely known for some of his beliefs that he had. He was a kind of anti-government, self-described sovereign citizen, and actually those sort of views found some sympathy, particularly in the area of Australia where he was, and that views that were kind of heightened during the COVID pandemic as well. And now it looks as if he's been killed by police. Clearly there's going to be, excuse me, an investigation into whether it was justified, but police say it was their view that it very much was.
Very interesting, Molly. Thank you. And we're going to go live to Australia actually later in the show and to hear a little bit more about this. But thanks very much indeed.
Molly, great stuff. Thanks so much. Right, time to speak to the government now, and delighted to say we're joined by Emma Reynolds, the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks so much for joining us. We know that the Prime Minister is meeting today with various leaders of business, particularly in the energy sector. Is there any fear in government, forget prices for a moment, but that supply might run out of energy in the months ahead?
Well, supply at the moment remains stable, but obviously we've got to prepare for all eventualities. We hope very much that this conflict can be de-escalated escalated, and we're leading international work with allies around that. But we have to plan in case that's not the case, which is why the Prime Minister, as you say, is meeting with leaders from energy companies and indeed shipping and logistics today. But that is to make sure that we work constructively with the industry. We want to make sure there isn't any market abuse, of course, but we also need to prepare for all eventualities, as I've said.
Is there any need for people to ration their energy use?
No, we're not advising that. As you'll have seen also, the RAC and the AA have in recent days said people should fill up at the petrol pumps as usual. In fact, thanks to the decision of this government this week, people see their energy bills come down by £117. We're determined to help people with the cost of living. And as you know, most people in the country were not reliant on heating oil, although there's support for those people too. We'll have the energy price cap, and that will, as I say, the price will come down, and then that will stay the case until June.
Interested, though, that you're still sort of forgive me for framing this way, sort of patting yourself on the back for it coming down, because it's forecast in July it will go back up again more than it's come down, and of course could get a lot worse from there. What is the sort of price point that would be the trigger for the government to step in and help? The energy price cap is about £1,600 from next week. It's expected to rise to £1,900 or £2,000 in July. What level leads to government support?
Well, the reference period for the next decision on the price cap, it hasn't yet been reached. So they do an assessment on the recent weeks and months and then decide the energy price cap. Obviously, we're keeping a very close eye on that because energy prices are going up, but supply is. Well, I want to just reassure your listeners that supply is stable. So we're not advising that people change their habits, fill up at the petrol pump as usual, and the price cap will protect people until the end of June. Obviously, then a decision will have to be taken by Ofgem on the basis of the reference period that's coming up.
I know, but I guess I'm just sort of asking for a gauge, whether it's for people at home watching or for the bond markets that are always listening to all of the conversations. The price cap's £1,600 now. It's forecast, yes, it's not set in stone yet, to rise to £1,900 or £2,000 in July. In the Russia-Ukraine war, the peak of it, the government stepped in and capped bills at £2,500 from October 2022 to June 2023. So we're actually still quite some way from there. Is that sort of price level, again, the level where the government would start to help consumers, or is it below that?
You'll forgive me. I'm not going to make decisions about the price cap on your programme. It's not my job either. But what I would say to people is that we are keeping a very close eye on this. Cobra met last week with the Prime Minister chairing that meeting. Ministers are continuing to meet throughout recess to look at any domestic implications of what's happening in the Middle East. We are preparing for all eventualities, but obviously the next price cap will be determined by what happens in the next few weeks and months, which we're keeping a very, very close eye on. And we are leading international efforts to de-escalate this conflict because it's endangering people across that region, the Middle East, some of our own people as well, but also because it's having an impact back at home. And we're determined to help people with the cost of living and ease the pressures that we've seen even before this conflict began.
I wanted to move on to an area that is very, very much under your department, and food, and specifically fertiliser. Clearly a lot does come out of the Strait of Hormuz, and our supply is less clearly guaranteed as it is for the likes of gas and oil. Is there a risk, if this war prolongs for a long, long time, that we could have pressures on the farming sector's access to fertiliser?
Well, I'm working very closely with the National Farmers Union, and the vast majority of farmers for this planting season have already bought fertiliser, but we are keeping a close eye on it. It's something that is, the supply for the moment is stable. We do import fertiliser from other parts of the world, not especially the Middle East, but obviously the price has seen a rise. It's something that I'm keeping under very close review. And as a whole, obviously, as a government, we are looking at what's happening to prices across the board, including food prices, because obviously, people have to go out and go shopping. It's not something that they can, it's not a discretionary spend, as they call it. It's something that's fundamental, and it tends to be a higher percentage of people's incomes if they're on low income. So it's something that we're keeping a very close eye on. But I am working very, very closely with the Farmers Union on this and other issues.
So I guess similar question to energy earlier. Is there zero chance of the need for rationing when it comes to food?
Look, we are not asking people to ration when it comes to food. Supply of food is as normal, just as the supply of petrol is. So no, we're not asking people to change their behaviour. Obviously, if we did see further increases in energy prices, that has an impact. That could have an impact on food inflation. That's what we saw with the Ukraine conflict. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that. We're not complacent about any of these things. I just wanted to reassure you. But no, we're not advising people to ration food or to change the way that they shop in the supermarket or indeed at the petrol pump.
Whether it's food and fertiliser and the chemicals that are required for that, whether it's energy and it's oil and gas, do you pause in a moment like this and step back and think, gosh, once again, whether it was COVID, Russia, Ukraine, or now this, it's a growing sense that we need to be more domestically self-sufficient?
Well, that is something that I am working on and started working on before this current Middle East conflict began. Last year, we had the report from Minette Batters, who used to be the president of the National Farmers Union, advising me and the government on how we can help farmers become more profitable and productive. I had a meeting of the Farming and Food Partnership Board last week. This is a new board to make sure that the government works in lockstep with the whole food chain. We are in the coming weeks going to be producing sector growth plans for horticulture and then poultry. In horticulture, we have great potential as a country to produce much more of the food that we eat, the fruit and veg that we eat, and we're determined as a government to help the sector grow and to bring down some of the barriers, whether they're planning barriers or other barriers to grow, so that they can grow more of the food that we eat.
The Prime Minister will be launching your party's local election bids later on today, 6 weeks away, of course. Is there a level, if Labour's support fell below, that collectively, even personally, the Prime Minister would think it's time to move on? Less than 20%? Less than 15%?
No, look, firstly, I'll say this. The Prime Minister has shown great leadership over the Middle East conflict. He has not let the UK be dragged into this war. That is something that the Conservative leader and the Reform leader would have had us done. And then they, backtracked on that when they saw the impact back at home. Look, incumbent governments don't always do well at local elections because people can cast their vote often, sometimes as a protest vote, but we will fight for every vote. We're launching our local election campaign in the West Midlands today, which is why I'm up here. I'll be soon going to that this morning. And we're focusing on how we help people to ease the cost of living, whether it's the reduction in energy bills, whether it's the increase in the national minimum wage, the increase in the state pension. We're doing all that we can to stand on the side of people across the country to help ease the cost of living pressures that they're facing, because we know that's something that worry people across the board. So we're determined to make a difference. We're investing in people's communities, restoring pride in Britain with the Pride in Place programme that we have, which is investing in hundreds of communities across England and enabling people to make local decisions about how they spend that money.
Emma Reynolds, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Interesting stuff. Very much keep calm, carry on.
Yeah.
That's the message.
Well, I think, the prices are going up. I do think two things. It is worth noting that we didn't start getting government support until £2,500, and we're still some way below that. So in that sense, we still haven't had a guide from the government. We've had a guide about it'll be means tested.
Yeah.
But they might get away with not having to do anything, depending on where that threshold is for where the support comes from. I do think it's important to always note what they're saying on supply. Like, we get the vast majority of our oil and gas from the places in and around us, like Norway. So it's an important message that rationing isn't something that is expected. Pricing of it and therefore UK borrowing costs is a problem.
Yeah, but they've got the energy cap protects people up until the end of June, so this question will carry on in the weeks ahead. Now then, one family has made it their mission to change safety measures in nurseries after their daughter died in 2022 at just 9 months old. John and Katie Meehan want compulsory CCTV in nurseries, better guidance on safer sleep and a more robust inspection process through Ofsted.
Our correspondent Tom Parmenter has been to meet them and has this report.
Genevieve's parents are now fighting on her behalf. She died at a nursery after she was put face down on a beanbag to sleep. Her mum and dad are now campaigning to make nurseries safer, not solely after their own tragedy, but a series of horrific cases, including these nursery workers jailed for depraved sexual offences.
It's story after story now, where children are being either physically abused, mentally abused, and it's in all different parts of the country. And it really is frightening.
They want clearer guidance on safer sleeping, compulsory CCTV and tougher inspections from Ofsted.
The loss of Genevieve absolutely destroyed our lives. So for people to listen and to say, this beautiful little girl is gone, we are going to make sure that doesn't happen again, that goes a long way in helping us to feel as though we have some sort of justice for her.
We joined them as they met the minister responsible for early years education.
What they're calling for is what we're delivering. We're doing our review on CCTV. We've made changes to Ofsted. We are making the changes to the EYFS on safer sleeping. And I don't want parents to feel afraid, but I want them to know that this government is doing everything it can to make sure that your children are safe when they go through that door.
But nursery workers have told us that isn't always the case. When Ellie was starting her career in childcare, she says she was ignored when she tried to raise safeguarding concerns.
Because I had no physical evidence, because there were no cameras within the nursery, they said, well, there's nothing we can do, there's no solid proof. They didn't even want to launch an investigation. That was completely shocking. If concerns are raised, that should be looked into.
She now works in a nursery that she is confident in, but says some settings just aren't safe enough.
They're willing to hire certain employees that they wouldn't normally hire, or let things go over their head that aren't deemed acceptable in childcare.
It's the last thing that working parents want to hear.
There's rules and regulations and restrictions in place. Make sure that they're followed.
These are our children, we want them to be as safe as possible. People said, you need a village to raise a child. This is our village.
So how to reassure families in the face of such horrible stories? Well, it can be done. At this Kids Planet in North Manchester, they have CCTV across the nursery, robust staff training and clear expectations of their team.
The truth is, there isn't one simple fix. It's a combination of monitoring, technology, finances, and key to it all, culture and training.
It's about the vigilance, always looking across your settings and thinking, how can we ensure our teams are as confident as they possibly can be by creating that open culture? And it's about taking everything seriously.
Some nurseries are stretched and under pressure, but that culture is how children will be made safer. It's not just CCTV, not just training or inspections. It all needs to work together every single day. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Coming up, we're going to talk about the future of AI and the impact it can have on the workplace. We're going to be speaking to Professor Carl Frey, who's the Future of Work Director at Oxford University, about what he thinks it's going to mean.
best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Right, we're going to talk AI now and the potential impact on the workplace.
The conventional wisdom is that tech will improve productivity, but could cost certain jobs in the process.
Well, let's get more on this. We can talk now to Professor Kharg Frey, who's Future of Work Director at Oxford University. So good to talk to you this morning, Professor Frey. This is a conversation I'm sure that's going on in a lot of households up and down the country. What impact is AI going to have on jobs? Lots of teenagers thinking about future careers and which ones might disappear as a result of AI. So how concerned should we be about AI in the workplace, do you think?
Well, there's no question that fundamental changes are happening both to the workplace and to the future of education. And it's still early days and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So I think it's normal as a parent, it's normal as a young person looking to their future career to be concerned. At the same time, AI does offer a lot of opportunities. It means that the skills needed often to do knowledge work are not necessarily as hard to acquire as they used to be. And so we're seeing a lot of barriers to entry in a range of profession coming down as a result of AI today. It's easier to be a programmer. It's easier to do financial modeling. It's easier to do a wide range of things.
So do you change the advice you give people as to what they should be, either if they're already in the workplace or if they're students, what they should be focusing their studies on, their training on?
So I don't necessarily think that it's primarily about what subject you study. So AI tends to do well where there's a lot of data, where there's a lot of examples, where there's a lot of precedent. It tends to fail in domains that rapidly change day to day, where one situation is not comparable to the situation you were in the previous day. And so the more volatility, the more change you have in your job, the less likely you are to be automated in that role. And so resilience remains a human skill. And I think focusing on those kind of things that AI doesn't do well is helpful. In-person communication is another domain, right? So the more we use AI for communication in the virtual space, well, how do you distinguish yourself in such a world? Well, it's going to be through in-person communication and social networks and relationships.
As a general rule, is it fair to say that AI tends to do entry-level jobs fairly well? And does that pose a challenge for young people trying to get started in their careers?
I think that is right. At the same time, firms are concerned about their talent pipeline. And I think there's a real risk that some firms are, at the moment, trying to automate too much entry-level work without considering the downstream implications for that when it comes to building the next generation of leadership talent. And so I think we will see a correction to the decline in entry-level hiring going forward. But there are obviously many other things happening in the economy right now. Interest rates are high. There's a lot of uncertainty related to the war in Iran and trade policy more generally, and that is having an impact as well.
I think fairly commonly the view is that the US and China lead the world in this technology, and that all the rest of us are just going to have to sort of license or buy the capability from them. Is that your view as well?
Well, I think it's important to remember that artificial intelligence, we use it as one term, but it's a bit like, the word vehicle, right? An airplane is not the same as a truck. And so there are many different approaches to artificial intelligence out there. When it comes to large language models in particular, yes, the US is way ahead and China is up there too. But it's also true that there are so-called open weight models out there which you can take and tweak and improve. And there's no reason why Britain and Europe could not play a role there. There's also no reason why Britain and Europe could not play a role in the kind of basic research that will be needed for AI to improve going forward. Right now, AI is very compute and data intensive. Human can learn from just a few examples. And we need more data sparse, data saving, and less compute intensive AI going forward for a number of applications. And Europe can still be leading in that kind of research, provided we are able to attract the right talent.
Just very briefly, I think more than 10 years ago now, you said that you thought that 97% of roles would end up being computerised. What's your view now? Have you revised your figure at all?
It was 47%, to be fair, and it was exposed to automation. And so what we were talking about in that paper is, can a machine or an algorithm do the job? And so, yes, you can sit in a giant vending machine, for example, right? But most people prefer to interact with a human waiter or waitress. Or AI can do translation work better than most humans, but if I want my birth certificate translated into English, well, I'm going to have a certified translator for that. And so even the best translation tools are not going to replace it for that reason. And so I think it's fair to say that many of the domains we were looking at back then, we've seen a lot of progress, but we haven't seen that show up in the labor market statistics yet, partly because of consumer preferences, rules and regulations, but also because some of the technologies have taken longer to actually be adopted. So many of the professions we predict are exposed to automation or in transportation, logistics. We haven't seen those truck drivers being replaced yet, but the technology is getting there.
Professor, thank you so much for joining us. One final thought as we leave you. I have to say, I'm very struck by this as we're joined by a professor from Oxford. But clearly you think AI means there's no longer a need for physical books anymore.
I thought you might notice that. We're very your empty shelves.
Bare shelves behind you.
Well, in the end of the day, there's a lot of information that is available in the virtual space these days. And one of the key, benefits of the internet is that you don't necessarily always have to go down to the library and search for those books.
Well, the libraries can be repossessed in Oxford then. There's a lot of them there. They're obviously not needed. Great stuff, Professor Frey. Thanks for joining us.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
You know what? One thing that AI can't get into? Live sports.
Live sport.
Yeah, but do you think Tottenham could use AI to try and figure out who their best fit would be for their next coach? They probably do that.
They probably need it.
Anyway, there are many names in the ring. This morning we'll be discussing what's going to happen next for Tottenham, who is going to be their new coach. If you know, please tell us. Igor Tudor left the club after just 44 days yesterday. So that is the main talking point this morning. But also, I don't know if you watched the Formula One yesterday. Pretty interesting. Kimi Antonelli leads the standings, first teenager to do that. But there was a big crash, and that has opened up another conversation.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Time for the sport, and there's been no Premier League action on the pitch over the weekend.
No.
Off the pitch there has been.
Yeah, international break. But, yeah, the news popped yesterday that Igor Tudor, who is the manager of Tottenham, is no longer the manager of Tottenham. And as expected, he was sacked after just 44 days. Now, perhaps that would have happened after the Nottingham Forest match, but for the fact that his father died, he was away in mourning in Croatia, and I think the club were just being very respectful and giving him some time to deal with that. But he indeed went yesterday, as did most of his coaching staff went with him. And that's, 3-0 defeat against Forest was the final straw, and they now have 7 games to really save their season and sustain the Premier League. So who do you pick? Do you pick someone to just ride out the end of the season and keep you in the Premier League? Or do you try and convince someone to go in, for the whole shebang and sign a long contract with a view to the players will play for you more because you're there for the long haul?
But who's going to take that job when there's a risk they'll go down?
Harry Redknapp.
And also...
The only way I
also,
would support Spurs to stay up is if it's for Harry Redknapp.
I think that's a long shot. I mean, he retired in 2017.
I know.
So
I don't expect...
I think Harry is a long shot. I mean, I think he would galvanise the fans and he would definitely galvanise the dressing room.
He'd galvanise Arsenal fans to support them. I love Harry.
OK, you're the only one. Well, everyone loves Harry, but you were the only Arsenal fan that would actually back a Spurs.
I wouldn't
coach.
quite.
But I mean, he's been mentioned. He's been mentioned. The guy though that's been mentioned the most is Roberto De Zerbi. He's the main name in the frame, it seems. Former Brighton boss, most recently at Marseille. Comes with a lot of chaos. He fell out at Brighton because he didn't have enough control over who they signed and things like that. So he is definitely a man in the frame. I think the rumour is he didn't want to really take a job until after the summer, and I think a lot of managers are in that boat.
He's still at Marseille or not?
No, he's not. So he's available. So I think a lot of managers just want to be free for the summer and maybe go to the World Cup and whatever. I don't know, and start fresh in the new season. But also, a lot of managers will want to know, oh, well, where are you going to be? Where are Spurs going to be? Are you a Premier League club? What am I signing? Am I going to a Premier League club or am I going to a Championship club? And that's what they don't know. Let's move on from him. Marco Silva was a name that, is in the frame. But he's at Fulham. They're pushing for European football. Mm-hmm. So,
he's not going to leave.
Is he realistically
maybe in the summer?
Frame? But, I mean, he's out of contract in the summer, and that's a name that they've very much liked. And he's actually liked like Tottenham. Maurizio Pochettino, another name that's been bandied about. He's at the USA, so he's
about to host the World Cup.
About to host the World Cup. So he will not be leaving there until after the summer. So that if you want Poch back, who got them to the Champions League final, then you've got to wait. So you've got to find someone to tide them over. Robbie Keane, 2 spells as a player, very successful player at Spurs, and very loved at Spurs, doing a brilliant managerial job at Ferencváros in Hungary. They are top of the Hungarian league. They are in the quarterfinals of the Europa League. But why would he leave that project to go to Spurs, which is so very risky? And of course, Sean Dyche is a man who's in the frame. Always, when there's a rescue mission to be had, he's in the frame. Tim Sherwood also threw his hat in the frame, former Spurs player, yesterday on Sky Sports News, and said anybody with common sense would keep them in the Premier League. I mean, they're 1 point above the drop zone. And when they play next, which is Sunderland away, which is on the 12th of April, they could already be in the bottom 3 because West Ham will have already played their match before them. So it is such a tricky situation. And then quite a few papers this morning saying, well, Glenn Hoddle would be a good choice because...
God, it's a long list, isn't it?
He has managerial experience, but he's not managed for... I'm going to say 20 years.
I think of all the ones you've listed there, Sean Dyche seems the most likely.
He's sort of distanced himself from it.
Oh, well, then maybe not.
Not in a sort of out and out, I would not take this job kind of way, but sort of distanced himself, and he would probably want not just a 7-game contract, he'd want a 1.5 year or 2-year contract. So that's where we're at with Spurs, but it's interesting. They, someone, even if they go in now, they can't work with the players because they're all away on international duty, most of them. So it's, you've got this sort of lag, and then you've got to hit the ground absolutely running when those players come back.
F1.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched it at the weekend.
I didn't know it was on. I woke up and it was...
Yeah, it was quite early.
Yeah.
But you are up early
I get up
because
quite early.
you've got a youngster. Kimi Antonelli won it.
And he likes it because it's just fast cars.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. Stick it on.
Yeah, it's just shocker right there. And it goes on for quite a while.
He doesn't find it boring, which the rest... No, I'm joking.
Kimi Antonelli is almost as young as your son, actually. Just 19. He's actually the first teenager to leave the championship. Won it. 2nd race in a row. Amazing for him to have such a young driver for Mercedes winning again and to be in the conversation about who might be world champion. Incredible. But there were quite a lot of talking points aside from him, and apart from the fact he wasn't allowed any champagne on the podium because he's underage in Japan because the drinking age is 20. Right. Yeah. But that's beside the point.
He still got sprayed with plenty of it. Probably touched his lips.
Close your mouth. Yeah, I mean, it's not popular. These engines are not popular with everybody, and certainly some of the cars are not as good as his car. And, this gap that we've now got because of the war in Iran, the next 2 races being cancelled, there are about 5 or so weeks for the teams to really work on their cars. Max Verstappen said after that race to a reporter, he's not enjoying this 50-50 split between a combustion engine and a battery. He said, you don't like it, it's not racing, you can't, full throttle the car, you can't drive it properly because you're at the mercy of the battery, and is the battery running out, and how do I manage it? And, when you're overtaking, it's not a proper overtake because you overtake and then you run out of battery and then someone else overtakes you. So it's, your overtaking manoeuvre is just very short-lived. He said, just not enjoying it. He said, I can live with being down in 7th or 8th, but the fact is I just don't enjoy this. I don't think it's proper Formula One racing, and which was really shocking. How do you keep someone like him in? But, he's got a point in that there was a really bad crash in that race. Ollie Berman, the young British driver, crashed into the wall because he was trying to take evasive action because his car, he was using the boost of his battery, his car was going so much faster after the turn than the car in front of him that he either crashed into the car in front of him, which was an Alpine, or he avoided the car, and that was the result of it. And he walked off limping. Nothing was broken, and thank goodness he was fine. But the FIA are going to have to look at that because that's dangerous. You cannot have those. I'm going so much faster. That car's now run out of gas pretty much, and it's going so much slower. But it's in front of me. What do I do?
Switch us back to the football is because it's international break. England, have we still got another game?
Yeah, so Japan is on Tuesday night. Scotland have also got a match as well, and Thomas Tuchel has only got one more camp after this until he has to pick his 26th for the World Cup. So You know, it's important. A lot of Arsenal players have left their respective camps. 10 Arsenal players have left their respective camps with injury niggles, including Declan Rice, which is, I think, quite interesting. But, you know, a big job for Thomas Tuchel. You're running out of games. You've got Japan, then you've got 2 more friendlies, and then you're straight into Croatia.
So what will he do this time? Because over the weekend he picked sort of not the surefire. Yeah. So
yeah, he's brought back his sure things. So I think it'd probably be a mix of sure things and the ones I think I might like to pick. But let's see.
Interesting.
That's Tuesday night. I thought it might have been tonight, but it's good to know.
Change your plans.
Well, not really. Still going to get up early, not going to be able to watch it. Jackie, great stuff. Thank you very much. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with all the day's top stories in just a couple of minutes.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello, very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Jones and Frost.
With Anna and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
Donald Trump says negotiations with Iran are going extremely well, even as he considers seizing the country's oil.
The Prime Minister holds talks with fuel bosses as supply fears grow over the ongoing blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
Farmers warn of the looming spectre of food shortages if the strait remains closed.
Also this hour, we're speaking to Esther Jai, the mother of murdered teenager Brianna Jai. She says social media stole her daughter's childhood and backs a ban for under 16s.
3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition.
And the countdown is on to the first manned mission to the moon in more than 5 decades.
Very good morning to you. The war in the Middle East continues to escalate and there's a real sense of crisis today. Oil prices surging higher again. $115 a barrel the price this morning as Iran's stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz remains. The Prime Minister is holding round-table talks later this morning with energy and shipping bosses to discuss the crisis, and there's warnings from the food industry about possible shortages going forward.
Well, wider tensions in the region are intensifying as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced an expansion of his invasion of southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says his team are negotiating extremely well with Tehran, and he says he's confident a ceasefire deal could be reached soon. Well, the US president also told the Financial Times that he's considering seizing Iran's oil, a move which would likely see the US occupy Kharg Island. So here's what Trump had to say overnight.
We are negotiating with them directly and indirectly. We have emissaries, but we also are dealing directly. And as you know, they've agreed to send 8 boats 2 days ago, and then they added another 2, so it was 10 boats. And now today they gave us as a tribute, I don't know, I can't define it exactly, but they gave us, I think out of a sign of respect, 20 boats of oil, big boats of oil, going through the Hormuz Strait. And that's taking place starting tomorrow morning. Over the next couple of days, a lot of boats. And I would only say that we're doing extremely well in that negotiation, but you never know with Iran because we negotiate with them and then we always have to blow them up.
Well, despite Trump's confidence in ceasefire talks, Iran's announced it will be targeting the private homes of US and Israeli officials in the Middle East. It's a move they say is a retaliation for US and Israeli attacks on residential areas.
In light of the malicious actions and terrorist measures of the American Zionist enemies and their targeting of residential homes of the Iranian people in various cities, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran will, in retaliatory action, target the residences of American and Zionist regime commanders and political officials in the region and in the occupied territories.
Well, in the wider region, a UN peacekeeper has been killed in Lebanon. The UN says one other peacekeeper was also critically injured in an explosion in the south of the country. It's not yet known where it was launched from, but the United Nations interim force in Lebanon is investigating and says deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law.
Sky's Sally Lockwood is in Dubai for us. Sally, good morning to you again. What's the sort of snapshot there in the region of whether we're sort of on an escalatory path or whether these talks have real prospects of working?
Yeah, hello again to you both, Wilf. Certainly, after more than a month of war here now, it doesn't feel like things are going to wrap up anytime soon. And let's not forget, this is a war that Gulf states, including the UAE, did not want. And we had our heaviest day of bombardment here in the UAE yesterday in a long time. A couple more emergency alerts overnight. This has all become very normal here. But I think the big concern and what we're all watching in this region is what comes next. So Kuwait is already reporting this morning that they've had an attack on their energy infrastructure there, as well as a desalination plant. Now, I think that's only the second desalination plant that we know of that has been hit so far by Iran in this war. The first was in Bahrain, but that's extremely concerning. Iran has threatened to go for desalination plants and energy infrastructure in neighbouring countries in on American allies' territory if the US goes after Iranian power plants as they've threatened. So that's two, extremely concerning developments. The fact that we're receiving more missiles and drones here, that Kuwait's been targeted. Tehran has also had their energy infrastructure hit, which has resulted in blackouts. And now we've also seen the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen getting involved in this war, which also threatens to exacerbate the economic impact of this war when it comes to commercial shipping, because they could very, very realistically disrupt shipping in the Red Sea, which would make things even worse from what we're already seeing here with the Strait of Hormuz. So it doesn't feel great this morning, I'm not going to lie, but also you just need to listen to the rhetoric coming out of Washington and Tehran to see that, you know, the stakes are very high here, the threats are big, and the troop movement is significant as well. 2,500 Marines and around 1,000 sailors have moved to the region over the weekend from the Sea of Japan. The 82nd Airborne Division is being deployed as well. They're paratroopers. And we hear that the Pentagon is also considering deploying another 10,000 ground troops. So this doesn't look great. It doesn't feel like the war is moving in any way a direction of de-escalation. And Iran is watching very closely. They've said, you know, if you send in ground troops, we're ready, we're waiting, and the Iranian army will be here waiting for you.
Sally, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for that, Sally Lockwood, for us live in Dubai. Well, let's see what the markets think about all of this. And they are really interpreting that final conclusion point from Sally there, that things could escalate as opposed to really buying the chance that these talks are going to work. Here is a 6-month chart of Brent crude. It's up about 3% this morning, actually, a little bit more than last hour. It's at just shy of $116 a barrel. And if we rewind the clock to a week ago, we were at $114 a barrel this time last Monday. And then before the US market opened, President Trump posted on Truth Social this idea that there was going to be peace talks and that the war might be closer to the end, to the start. And that led to a sharp fall in oil prices last Monday. We then started to pick up again during the course of last week, particularly at the back end of last week. And essentially, this morning, we're rising again by another 3%, $116 a barrel for oil on the Brent gauge. As you can see, still up sharply since the start of the war, and most notably, up above where we were last Monday before there was hope that there might be peace talks that work. Just a quick snapshot of where we are on a longer-term time frame. But here's a 5-year chart of oil prices. And you can see we're back close to levels we haven't seen since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We're at 116. Back then, we did get above that temporarily, but we weren't above that for long temporarily. This is oil prices, obviously, not gas prices, but just gives you that context of where we are at this moment. Of course, sharply higher since the start of this war and comparable levels to 4 years ago. Borrowing costs, important to look at these as they open today, and they're kind of calm this morning, which is good to see, because on Friday they were anything but calm. If we show you the 10-year UK borrowing costs, you'll see that we've surged, of course, since the start of the war, and on Friday we saw another jump. We got back to 5% briefly on Friday. We closed at 4.9. We're up marginally this morning, but this is a real area of concern for the Chancellor. Borrowing costs have really moved higher. They moved sharply higher on Friday. They're calm this morning. The Chancellor will hope that remains the case. Just quickly wanted to end on the NASDAQ. This is US tech-heavy stocks, to give a context of how much they've pulled back, because we entered what's called correction territory on Friday. That means they're down 10% or more from their recent peak. The recent peak was October. We're now down, in fact, 12.5% since that level. So it's enough of a headline. We're in correction territory. President Trump doesn't want to see that. But look, here's the context. We're not down that much, really, are we? And that's since October. We're down 12%. For context, Liberation Day, when he announced his tariffs, we fell 11% in 2 days. And from that peak to the trough before he U-turned on his policy, we fell nearly 20%, 19%. So, yeah, a bit of pressure building for the president with the fall in the US stock market, but not enough, really, for him to U-turn as he did last April when he announced those tariffs on the world and then stepped back from the brink quite quickly. But oil prices, 116, up 3% today, definitely not buying the prospect of de-escalation.
No, and that's going to focus minds globally, isn't it? Because obviously higher oil prices leads into higher prices for everything, really, doesn't it? When you've got transportation considered and all the rest of it. And in fact, Keir Starmer certainly focused on this. Later on this morning, he's hosting a round table of fuel industry leaders at Downing Street.
And it's going to include leaders from energy companies, shipping companies, insurance sectors as well. Lucy's here to tell us a bit more about what we can expect. Is it just a sort of calm everyone, try and make sure we're covering all that could unfold, or are we getting policy changes?
I think at the moment what we've seen it previously with petrol bosses, is we've got ministers trying to say to them, you need to be doing all that you can to keep prices down for customers. As you say, we've got people like the bosses of Shell, BP, finance bosses as well, HSBC, the military as well will be giving an update on the Strait of Hormuz. So yeah, I think it's partly the government saying you need to be doing all that you can, but also we do know that ministers are having serious talks about what can be done, particularly when the current price cap resets at the end of June, to help people with their energy costs. We don't have any significant financial announcements yet, but the government has made it clear that it's working on something. What we do know is that that would be means tested. It's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because I thought this played out in your interview with Emma Reynolds recently. The government is trying to say keep calm and carry on, supplies, food supplies, energy supplies, petrol, it's all fine. But at the same time, they say we are closely monitoring the situation. So there is clearly some concern. Let's just listen to what she said about food prices.
Well, look, we are not asking people to ration when it comes to food. Supply of food is as normal, just as the supply of petrol is. So no, we're not asking people to change their behaviour. Obviously, if we did see further increases in energy prices, that has an impact. That could have an impact on food inflation. That's what we saw with the Ukraine conflict. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that. We're not complacent about any of these things. I just wanted to reassure you.
Yeah, so basically the message, all fine for now. But meanwhile, there's a certain amount of pressure coming from opposition parties who have very different ideas of how we should be solving this issue. The Tories, for example, talking about drilling in the North Sea, and they're not the only ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And to a certain extent, you would expect there to be some political pressure on the government. Obviously, the Conservatives going very heavy on oil and gas drilling in the North Sea, for example. There's also talk around the government continuing the freeze on fuel duty come September. But ministers are very clearly trying to kind of keep time, you know, they think they've got time on their side. No decisions, particularly on the price cap, don't need to be made until the end of June, fuel duty until September. So we're seeing these roundtables, these meetings, a lot of rhetoric from the Prime Minister, for example, I think really keen to say to people, we are focusing on the cost of living, it's our mission, and we will look after you. However, they're holding off on making any significant, expensive decisions just yet.
Lucy, great stuff as always. Thank you very much. Lucy. Now, the fugitive gunman who's been on the run for more than 6 months in Australia is believed to have been shot dead by police.
Yeah, this is Desi Freeman. Allegedly, he killed 2 police officers in the state of Victoria last August before fleeing into bushland, leading to a major manhunt. So let's find out a little bit more about it. Molly's here. Hi, Molly. I mean, this is an extraordinary story. I know it's captured people's imaginations and probably scared people in Australia as well. Tell us a little bit about what has happened.
Yeah, so it's the best part of 7 months, really, that he's been evading justice after allegedly killing 2 police officers in August last year. And the reason I think it's captured people's imaginations is because of the scale of the kind of investigation to try and find him. There was this massive manhunt that's been going on for the last 7 months. He basically vanished into a massive area of bushland in quite a rural part of northeast Victoria. And the police actually offered £500,000 for any information that might have led to his arrest, but to no avail until they found him, and it's understood that officers shot and killed him during this kind of 3-hour-long standoff in a similar area, actually, to where that original incident happened. After what police described as a cross between a container and a long caravan, he'd been in hiding. Look, they said that their aim was to, you know, find him, arrest him, for him to surrender himself. Clearly that didn't happen. The police say they feel that what has happened is justified, but I think we can hear a clip from the Chief Commissioner.
The very first people to be made aware of the outcome of this operation were the families of the officers tragically killed on the 26th of August, and all of the members that were involved on that day. What I can say, should it be confirmed that the deceased is Freeman, this brings closure to what was a tragic and terrible event. It did result from a standoff, the deployment of tactics. He then exited the building. There was an opportunity for him to surrender peacefully, which he did not.
So, Molly, just give us a bit more background on this, because this has completely captured, understandably, but captured attention in Australia for the last 7 months in a way that not everyone knows the details here.
Yeah, so the reason why he's, I guess, kind of a well-known face is because of that incident, really, where officers went to his property, actually as part of an investigation into sex offences. But the reason he sort of, I guess, captured the imagination of so many people is because he was quite a well-known figure insofar as he built up this sort of public profile, particularly since COVID. He was a kind of anti-establishment, anti-government figure. Some of his views actually found some sympathies within parts of Victoria and parts of Australia. He actually described himself as a sovereign citizen. He was well known to kind of authorities. He'd come into conflict with the law quite a lot. So that was his kind of background. But now it appears that police have found him and they've killed him. And there is clearly now going to be an investigation into that. But the police very much have the view that their shooting was justified.
Molly, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Now, we've been talking about the impact of the war on oil prices, but the consequences could stretch further than that.
The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has directly impacted global supplies of fertiliser and gas, which food producers and farmers warn is impacting supply. They've been speaking to our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, and a warning, rising costs will soon have to be passed on to consumers.
Come on. This spring, the most sought-after commodity in agriculture isn't sunshine or rain. It's in these tanks. The start of the growing season brings a steady stream of tankers to Brynflow's Great Yarmouth terminal. They're loading liquid nitrogen to spray on crops across the country. Thanks to the war, they may be spreading food inflation too.
In these tanks is liquid fertiliser. It's come from natural gas. Turned into ammonia, and from ammonia into nitric acid and urea.
Fertiliser prices have risen because it's an energy product. The price of natural gas has skyrocketed, and Gulf production, normally a third of global supply, is stranded.
It's a really serious situation. In some respects, it's worse than it was 4 years ago in the Ukrainian situation. And we all know what happened 6 months later. There was 10% inflation, and that knocked the government right back.
Those white sacks are full of urea. It's a crucial ingredient in fertiliser. Since the war began, each 1 tonne bag has almost doubled in value from around $300 to more than $600. And it's happened at precisely the worst moment. In Britain and across Europe, it is the growing season. Lovely spring day.
Gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah. 150 miles west in the Cotswolds, beef farmer David Barton is already counting the cost. It's peak calving season and his heifers are enjoying the last of the winter feed stock.
Traditionally, livestock farmers tend to buy it in the spring. That had gone from about £370 a tonne for the compound that I buy to $479. I ordered it. I got a price on a day. I ordered it in that afternoon. The following day, I was told it's gone up £20 a tonne.
And what difference will the fertiliser make to the kind of yield?
Oh, if I didn't put any on, it would be half the yield.
It's about 70 miles.
70 miles of tomatoes. That's incredible. In the glasshouses of the Lee Valley, north of London, the first crop of sweet peppers will be picked this week. The cherry tomatoes will follow in mid-April. An early summer made possible only by gas-fired heating and fertiliser.
The price of that gas has gone up 92% in 4 weeks, which is absolutely staggering.
If the prices stay where they are?
Disaster. And that is not only for this organisation, but every organisation that's involved in producing food.
For now, farmers and growers are bearing the brunt of the energy price spike, their narrow margins squeezed even tighter. If the war continues, by the time this summer's crops are harvested, consumers will be counting the cost too.
Now, the mother of murdered teenager Brianna Ghey is calling for tougher action to protect children online. Esther Ghey has been campaigning for a ban on smartphones in secondary schools and says Meta and YouTube being found liable in a social media addiction trial in the United States has given safety campaigners hope that things may change. She's also written to the Prime Minister urging stronger protection for children online. And I'm very pleased to say that a campaigner and mother of Brianna Ghey, Esther Ghey, is here with me now. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in. You've added a chapter to the book you wrote after your daughter was killed. It's called Under a Pink Sky, wasn't it? And I'm going to talk about a little bit to you about what that new chapter involves in a moment. But first, I just want to talk about your memoir, because in that book, you talked about the role that you felt that smartphones played in Brianna's death. Tell us a little bit about that and why you think they're so dangerous.
So Brianna was very addicted to her smartphone and social media. The impact that it had on her life, so the last 2 years of Brianna's life were absolutely filled with suffering, and this is why I campaigned so much, because of that time. And just, you mentioned before about the court case in America and about KGM, who has found Meta and Google, isn't it, to be...
Meta and YouTube, I think, is it?
Yeah, Meta and YouTube for her depression and body dysmorphia and all of these different types of things that she was impacted with. It really kind of reminds me of what Brianna went through. So, yeah, as a parent, I didn't know what to do at all. And I think that this court case in America now actually proves to parents that it's not a parental issue. It's not the child being naughty or withdrawing from the family. It's actually a product that's been designed to be highly addictive, and this is the issue, and it's time for government to really step in now.
And the new push that you're going with now is to ban smartphones in schools, and that's what this new chapter is about. So why do you think that's important? What difference do you think that can make?
So just to say that this is such a huge issue, and I think that we need multiple ways of dealing with this. And yeah, one strand is banning phones in schools. So the school that Brianna went to, Birchwood Community High School, they have recently, well, over a year ago now actually, they introduced phone pouches. So they lock phones away during the school day, and the results that they've seen have been absolutely remarkable. So there's been an increase in GCSE results, increase in staff wellbeing. There's been a reduction in safeguarding incidents around phone use. I think it was like from 80% to 20%. And even more. But like I wish I could tell you absolutely everything, but we've not got the time today. And because of this, I thought that it's a no-brainer. We need to do this. We need to make sure the phones are banned in schools. So yeah, this is my new campaign, and this is what we've added to the final chapter. We spoke to health professionals, members of the police, teachers. So we've got all of these different opinions around what is actually happening with young people and smartphones and social media.
The government say that the majority of schools don't allow kids to have their phones in class. So why does this make a difference? Why does making children put their phones in a pouch before class make a difference?
So currently we've got government guidance which has recently been updated. There is an out-of-sight policy still on this government guidance, which means that children should have the phones in the bags and shouldn't take them out during the school day. Now, we know that this doesn't work, and 11%, it's only 11% of secondary schools in the UK that actually have phones locked away or don't allow them on the premises in the first place. Out-of-sight policies don't work. You have children looking at the phones underneath the tables. Brianna used to go to the toilet and film TikTok videos. Like this, that pull to the screen is just far too much. We know it's addictive. The court case has shown now that it's addictive. So we need to make sure that we need to make sure that phones are locked away or not allowed on the premises. The most simple option is to just lock phones away during the school day, and it's so simple. So my campaign is calling for a statutory ban of phones in schools, along with funding for lockable pouches or a similar alternative. And I think that this is something that we really need. Head teachers need support. The updated guidance now also includes Ofsted inspection, so Ofsted inspection around phone use. So we're just like putting the cosh on teachers and saying that this is now going to be inspected on, but without any real support.
And what reaction are you getting from the government when you push this forward?
It's very slow. The government have now announced a consultation which is called Growing Up in the Online World. So I would really urge anybody who is concerned to fill in this consultation. However, I think this is going to take time. I think it's going to take 3 months, and then we're going to have to, then it's going to be another process. And meanwhile, whilst we're waiting, children's lives are being lost. There's a lack of concentration in the classroom. It's affecting confidence. It's affecting anxiety. So I think we really need to move fast on this.
And there's a huge debate in this country, and in fact in lots of countries, after Australia introduced a ban on social media for under 16s. Do you think that should be introduced here?
I would fully support a social media ban for under 16s, yeah.
Why do you think that would make a difference? There are some 16-year-olds or under 16-year-olds who would say that allows me to communicate with other people. I might feel isolated in my everyday life, and it allows me to communicate with people I have something in common with that I might not meet day to day. And for them, it's a huge lifeline. What would you say to them?
I completely understand that, and I think that what we need to do as a society is to create more real-world spaces. We know that there's a reduction in youth groups and after-school clubs now. We need to invest in these and make sure that children have this support in the real world. There was another court case, actually, in New Mexico that found that Meta were bringing in, Meta were responsible for child exploitation online as well, and it's far too harmful as it stands right now for young people to be on social media.
Even with the Online Safety Act, which is designed to force tech firms and social media sites to protect children from harmful content, you think that doesn't go far enough?
I think at the moment it's not fit for purpose, and I think that we need to make sure that the Online Safety Act is stronger. As I mentioned before, we need so many different approaches for this. And we need to make sure that social media is safe for 16-year-olds and older. But yeah, for now, I think that we do ban social media for under 16s.
OK, well, Esther Jai, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. And the new chapter in your book is coming out with the paperback next month, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the 30th of April, okay. So yeah, it's available for pre-order on Amazon.
OK, people are interested in that, in that call for a ban on smartphones. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Always amazes me how brilliantly she can keep everything together and turn the focus forwards and campaign for helping others. I think it's amazing to hear. And I think very interesting, the very clear view on school-based smartphone ban.
Yeah.
Which one does think would be quite an easy, quick step. Whereas I do understand the government taking their time to want to review what should be done more broadly with social media use for under 16s, given that it's not as simple and it does divide opinion a little bit more.
Yeah, and be so interesting to talk to some of the pupils as well, because many of them may feel relieved in some ways to not have, the demands of social media all day at school as well.
We should get those pouches at work as well.
We should. Yeah, we would find it quite difficult.
Sorry, boss, was in the pouch. Not my fault. After the break, we're going to go live to Australia to get the latest on that very high-profile case that we spoke to you about, the end of a 7-month manhunt for a fugitive who had allegedly killed 2 police officers and appears to have been killed himself early this morning.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Well, let's get more on our top story now. Donald Trump has said that negotiations with Iran are going extremely well. He's also told the Financial Times that he is tempted to seize Kharg Island. He wants Iran's oil, he's basically said. So let's talk now to Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council and the author of Goodbye Globalisation, Elizabeth Brawl. Very good morning to you. Well, let's pick up on the comments that Donald Trump has made overnight. He told the FT that his favourite thing is to take the oil in Iran. He suggested that he could take Kharg Island. What do you make of that?
It's an extraordinary development in the string of extraordinary developments. What is interesting, I think, is what he would try to do with Kharg Island. This is obviously the centre of Iranian oil production, energy production, and if he were to take that oil, then it wouldn't reach global markets, and the oil price would rise even more than it has so far. So we don't know what he's planning to do, but it's going to make the markets nervous for sure.
I guess the thought about potentially doing something like this and potentially using the troops that he sent there and to put boots on the ground one way or another is to escalate in order to de-escalate. I mean, as we sit, whatever the tactics are around that, as we sit here this Monday morning, do you think that it's more likely he goes down that route, some form of escalation, or do you buy into his ongoing positive comments about the peace talks, even though a week on from him introducing that idea, there hasn't been much to look at?
It's so hard to tell, but I think it's more likely that he's using the arrival of these troops to put pressure on Iran in the negotiations to essentially suggest you better agree to a deal or otherwise this is coming your way. But the Iranians are showing let's say, a very feisty response to these signals from Washington and even ridiculing him and his administration on social media. So they are not, they don't seem intimidated or frightened of the potential arrival of these troops, or the arrival and potential insertion into Iran of these troops. The people who are showing concern, though, are, as ever, the markets and America's allies in the Gulf, and indeed every country that's dependent on oil from the Gulf.
So if the troops are there partly to add pressure and to try and get some headway in talks, do you think Donald Trump wants out?
I think he does, because this is clearly beginning to rattle Americans at home and indeed countries around the world. We're already seeing a number of countries in Asia and even now in most recently Ethiopia introducing a cut to the work week. That is not good for the globalized economy, including for the factories of the world, countries like Sri Lanka, countries like Bangladesh, where so many of our consumer products are made. The fact that they can't continue the regular work week because they don't have enough fuel, that is going to depress the global economy, which is not good news for anybody in the long run.
Talk to us about the pressure that President Trump personally is feeling and how it may or may not have built since the start of the war. What is pressuring him? Which factors?
It's so hard to tell, but I think it's more likely that he's using the arrival of these troops to put pressure on Iran in the negotiations to essentially suggest you better agree to a deal or otherwise this is coming your way. But the Iranians are showing a very feisty response to these signals from Washington and even ridiculing him and his administration on social media. So they are not, they don't seem intimidated or frightened of the potential arrival of these troops. So I think the fundamental factor is Americans like military success, and they do support the armed forces, and the armed forces are extremely good, but the armed forces essentially execute what they are told to do by the civilian leadership, which is how it should be in a democracy. It worked very well in Venezuela, and as we all know, Trump wanted a Venezuela-style scenario in Iran and with a decapitation strategy, and got something completely different because the leadership keeps replenishing in Iran. And so what we are seeing is Americans getting concerned about, again, an extended war. And we have seen, for example, this weekend, massive No Kings rallies that were not just a protest against this war in Iran, but a protest generally about of Trump's leadership, Trump's current leadership, including from people within the MAGA movement who, as we know, voted for him because they wanted out of so-called forever wars.
So do you think public opinion matters to him, or market movements? Could they matter more? What's the biggest influence on him, do you think?
Public opinion will... It depends, in fact, on market movement. So if you see your own prices, your own expenses rise, you will get quite concerned about this war, even if you might be able to forgive him for starting a war that you hadn't voted for in the first place. So this is, I think, the really difficult conundrum for him. And we see President Trump himself, Marco Rubio and others saying, well, it will be over, the war will be over in 3 to 4 weeks' time. And unfortunately, it's not just for one side to determine how long the war will last. Once you have entered into a war, the other side gets to choose, gets a say in how long it lasts.
Elizabeth, thanks for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you.
To Australia now, and let's get more on the fatal shooting of a suspect after a months-long manhunt.
Yeah, Desi Freeman allegedly killed 2 officers while they were executing a search warrant in regional Victoria last August. Police say a man believed to be the fugitive was shot in a standoff on Monday morning.
Let's go live now to Australia, and we're joined by 10 News Australia reporter Harvey Biggs. Harvey, incredible story this. Just give, before the developments this morning, give our viewers here a bit of background on why it has captured so much attention in Australia over the last 6 or 7 months.
Good morning, Anna and Wilf. Yeah, it's been a massive story here. 2 police officers killed, and for 7 long months there's been no sighting of the man who did it, Desi Freeman, despite one of the biggest police manhunts in Australian history. Then came a tip-off around a week ago that he was at a bush property, a remote bush property at a town called Walwa, around 2 hours from here. And to give your viewers some context, where I'm here in Popunka is around 3.5 hours north of Melbourne. So Walwa is another 2 hours drive towards Sydney. Now, this morning, police officers moved in at around 5:30 a.m. They made an appeal to Desi Freeman to come out and surrender. That started a negotiation that lasted for 3 hours that ended when Freeman walked out of a shipping container. We're told he was wearing a blanket, and then from there he pulled out a gun, and that's when police fatally shot him. So this is the end of a very dark chapter in here that began 216 days ago, actually in the hills behind me, the remote property where this shooting took place, where 2 police officers were killed.
Well, Harvey, we really appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us there from Australia. Yeah, an extraordinary story, which I hadn't heard about, I have to be honest. So really interesting to hear a little bit more background on
big developments, yeah, in it overnight, and great to have him from Popunka, Australia.
I'm glad you said that, not me.
Well, I only waited for him to say it first to get the explainer. We are going to take a break. When we come back, the countdown is on for the first manned mission to the moon in more than 5 decades. Expected to have liftoff on Wednesday. We'll preview it.
And now I don't remember the last one, before you ask.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country. It's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching. Tonight on The Wrap, we will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond. You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
So NASA is preparing to send astronauts around the moon for the first time in more than 50 years, with Artemis 2 expected to launch in the coming days. The mission is a major step towards returning humans to the lunar surface and potentially even sending people to Mars.
For more, let's speak now to Chris Lintop, the Professor of Astrophysics at the University of Oxford. Our second Oxford Professor of the Day with many more books this time. Sorry, you missed our first segment. It was with an AI
that'll
professor.
mean nothing to you, but
who had bare
sometimes it's nice to have an old-fashioned background. So
exactly.
I'm sure my AI colleagues have have exciting things to look at.
A man that doesn't embrace the Kindle to the same extent. Great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Just remind us, we had a delay. Is it definitely going ahead now this week? It's Wednesday night?
No, we're told that everything is on course for a launch on Wednesday evening, our time in the UK. The weather has to be good. We're told there's an 80% chance that the weather will be good enough to set the astronauts on their way to the moon. But obviously, this is only the second launch of this rocket. It's the first time it's been launched with people on board. And so there are a huge number of things that have to go right for this to take off. If it doesn't go Wednesday, there's a couple of hours each evening for the next week where the moon is in the right position, the Earth is in the right position, and when there are other chances to launch. So I'm pretty hopeful that we will see this mission starting sometime in the next week.
Well, yeah, and it's very exciting. It's the first crewed mission to the moon for more than 5 decades. I mean, that is a long gap, isn't it? So why is it happening now? What's this all about?
It's essentially because the Americans want to put a flag back around and eventually on the moon. There are justifications in terms of lunar exploration. In the long run, lots of nations and space agencies want to think about having a base probably towards the south pole of the moon, which is a fascinating place geologically, but also a place where there may be water and other resources that could be used. But essentially, this is showing that NASA can still do this with a little help from its friends from the Canadian Space Agency and indeed contributions from the European Space Agency as well.
In terms of the sort of next steps, well, we mentioned in the intro there Mars, we mentioned landing on the moon. How far away are things like that? This is a stepping stone as opposed to an end in itself?
I think Mars is a completely different prospect. I think, there is this long sense that you learn how to do sort of crewed operations in deep space by being on the moon, and that's true, but Mars brings a whole other range of problems. In terms of the sequencing for Artemis, this is the equivalent of the Apollo 8 mission that sent 3 astronauts around the moon in 1968, so that's what we're doing with this one. There's a mission planned for next year, which will test some other aspects of the spacecraft in Earth orbit, and then the plan is for a landing on the moon in 2028. Now, there's a huge amount of development, including the rocket that will actually land on the moon, that still needs to be completed. So 2028 at best, I think, for a landing, even if everything goes well this week. In reality, I think probably we may still be 5, 6, 7 years away from anything like that.
And you mentioned this before, that the spacecraft hasn't been used with humans on board before. I mean, is that risky in any way?
Yes, very. Obviously, you want to make sure everything is performing as expected. But as an example, the first uncrewed mission, Artemis 1, which flew a very similar trajectory, actually went into orbit around the moon and then came back. The riskiest bit of this mission is actually the return to Earth, where the astronauts will hit the top of the Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles an hour, which is faster than anyone has ever traveled when coming back in to Earth. And the temperature on the outside of the spacecraft will reach a few thousand degrees. So it's all about whether the spacecraft survives that re-entry. There was some unexpected damage to the capsule after the first uncrewed mission. NASA think they've got a handle on why that is. They've changed actually the profile, the route the astronauts will be taking to make that safer this time. But this is only the second time, and there is an inherent risk to any space travel.
Professor, you said the Americans want to put a flag back down there. Two questions on that. Are there other competing nations that could get there, very soon themselves? And what are the rules around planting a flag? I mean, I guess there's no laws, right? Aren't there?
There's a UN convention on what you can leave on the surface, but it definitely allows flags. You have to be careful of the environment. The competition is China, so there is a Chinese lunar program, which at the minute is sending robotic missions. They just brought back a sample from the far side of the moon, which is telling us fascinating things about the moon's formation and history. We don't know the details of when they're planning a crewed attempt at landing. The 2030 or something like that has been speculated, so that we are back in a space race, although not one with the publicity that we saw in the 1960s.
There's extraordinary publicity for this, isn't there? I mean, these astronauts are such slick performers. I've seen a few news conferences with them recently. So calm, which is kind of what you want from an astronaut, I guess.
Yeah. Yes,
but
indeed.
Tell us some of the challenges for them personally, because they're shut together in this, I think it's about the size of a minibus, isn't it, the cabin they'll be in. What are the personal challenges on them, do you think?
I think that, as you say, it's a small space, although, of course, in weightlessness, you can use all three dimensions. But it's a 10-day mission where I think, actually, the biggest challenge is that they have very little control. For example, once the spacecraft heads off into lunar orbit, they're on a free ride trajectory. They don't need to steer or control the mission. So I think they need to be ready for the unexpected, to react if anything does go wrong or requires intervention. But most of the time, they're sort of there to monitor the systems and themselves. A large part of what NASA wants to do with this mission is to check the effects of this sort of mission on the astronauts' health. So I think it's that always on and never quite switched off that would be the problem. Astronauts are, of course, extraordinary people. I remember talking to a shuttle astronaut who told me that it's quite common that once they're loaded onto the spacecraft a few hours before launch, quite often they'll have a nap. The idea that you could sleep while sitting on top of this enormous rocket about to go to the moon is extraordinary, but that's the kind of people we're dealing with.
Yeah, cool as a cucumber. Professor Chris Lintop, really good to talk to you this morning. I was quite excited before about this launch. I'm even more excited now.
Me too. I agree. You teed it up very nicely for us, Professor. Thank you very much. And as he was suggesting, it's expected in the early hours of Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So we'll be all over it on Sky News throughout that process. And, of course, hopefully the weather stays good.
Yeah, exactly. 80% chance, he said, didn't he? Yeah, good stuff. Now then, Jackie's here and is going to tell us about the sport.
Didn't they plant a flag the last time?
Yes, they did. Unless you're a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm joking. No. But I get my question actually, which you didn't quite get to, was more about like who can set the rules up there.
Yeah, that's
not
true,
actually like the environmental reasons about what you can leave there or not.
Our flag, our rules.
Yeah, who gets there first will probably have the greatest say.
It's like the Wild West. It's kind of like the Wild West, actually. It's Spurs at the moment.
Great transition.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I meant it.
Did you actually? They're trying to find a new manager. What we thought was going to happen has happened yesterday, and Igor Tudor has been sacked after 44 days in charge. So the question is, who's going to come in to try and save their season and save them in the Premier League? Talking about that, also a big crash in the F1 yesterday. We'll be looking at that and what F1 may do or may not do in the future.
I thought there was a break. There's no break. So let's talk Spurs.
Well, you've teed it up straight into it. We all thought that.
We all thought that.
So
OK, so Igor Tudor, I think it was coming. We knew he was probably going to get sacked after the 3-0 loss to Nottingham Forest. And the fact is, his father died, so they gave a sort of respectful amount of time, which was 1 week, and then they sacked him yesterday. So the question is, who's going to come in for 7 games, save Spurs, keep them in the Premier League? There's an international gap going on at the moment, so the next time Spurs play is not until the 12th of April. By that time, they could already be in the bottom 3, because West Ham, who are below them, will have already played. And if they beat Wolves, they will go above them. So it could be a catastrophic situation. It already is, really, but they need someone to rescue it. So who do they get in? The man who's been talked about the most is Roberto De Zerbi. He used to manage at Brighton. He left Brighton because of differences of opinion, shall we say. It's quite a sort of chaotic character, I think. Fair to say. He was at Marseille. He was sacked at Marseille because of bad results, so he is free. He may not want the job now until he knows what he's dealing with. The key to Spurs, I suppose, is persuading him that it would be a good job to take. I think a lot of managers will go, well, are you a Premier League club or are you a Championship club? And you won't know that until the person comes in and tries to save them. Other names in the frame, Marco Silva at Fulham. He's got to finish his job at Fulham. He's not out of contract till the summer, so that's not going to happen immediately. Maurizio Pochettino with the USA. I think a lot of people would love him back at Spurs, given that he got them to a Champions League final, but he's got a job to do until after the World Cup, so that's not going to happen. Robbie Keane, great player at Spurs, 2 spells there, very, very popular, but doing an amazing job at Ferencvaros as manager there, got them to the European quarter-finals of the Europa League, so again, not available. Sean Dyche, always in the frame for these rescue missions and short-term fixes, but it is understood that Sean Dyche doesn't want to be a short-term fix manager, so he has distanced himself from this job. Tim Sherwood, a former player at Spurs, was on Sports News yesterday and pretty much went, I will do it and I will save them. Anybody with common sense could do it. You just need to play players in the right positions and have a structure and a plan. And I think the key is you need to know the Premier League. Mm-hmm. You need to know what you're dealing with. And that's the problem with Igor Tudor. He did not know what he was dealing with.
Do they also think now, should we just kept Thomas Frank?
I think a lot of people think they kept Thomas Frank for way too long. They should have ended that. It just wasn't working, and the football they were playing was not what they wanted, and it was just a very bad fit. Glenn Hoddle as well being talked about.
You didn't mention Harry Redknapp.
I know, and Harry Redknapp. I sort of think they're sort of fantastical appointments, but I mean they could pick up the phone to Harry. He would be so very popular.
You want Harry, that's right.
I love Harry.
But you're not a Spurs fan.
No, I know, so it would put me in a difficult position. I'd want Harry to succeed,
when I was a junior reporter
to.
and I was starting out and doing a lot of football, and you don't get treated very well. Back in the day, 30 years ago, female reporters were not treated well. He was the only one.
Was he really?
Who was very polite and lovely.
Oh, that is so good to hear.
I love Harry too. Anyway, should we move on to F1? Did you watch it?
I did watch it. I was up early yesterday.
I didn't see it, no.
No. So Suzuka, Kimi Antonelli won. He's the first teenager to lead the F1 World Championship after winning back-to-back races. Couldn't have champagne on the podium because, he's not 20 and that's the age of consent to drink in Japan, so that was quite funny.
They have a lemonade or something?
I think it was, they said it was sparkling, non-alcoholic sparkling.
Rose water they quite often give.
But how old was Lewis when he broke onto the scene?
I don't know exactly, but he was old. He was older. Yeah, he was 20. Older. Yeah, a little bit older. The thing about that race was there was a really big crash, and we can see that now. It was Ollie Behrman, high-speed crash. I think we can see the picture. He was going much faster than the car in front of him, who he could have overtaken, but he was going way too fast compared to the car in front. And this is the problem that they've been discussing in F1, that, you know, he was going 191 miles an hour. This kind of thing can happen more and more often and in more dangerous circumstances, road races, for example. The fact that he was using his battery and it was on a power boost phase, and I don't know the exact technical terms in F1, but the batteries are either recharging or they're on full charge, and you know you can go a lot faster and overtake. And the car in front, an Alpine, was not, and he just had to take evasive action. He couldn't go round, there was no opportunity to go round, so he had to avoid. And the Alpine said he was going so fast, I could see in my mirror that when he was spinning, he was even overtaking me. So this is dangerous. So there will be, I think there will be a meeting. And this is what prompted Max Verstappen to say, I don't like this style of racing. It's not Formula One.
And these rules came from where?
Well, they came in for the start of the new season.
And
managing an electrical battery, well, to make it more sustainable and less reliant on petrol. You know, the way the whole world is going, to make it sort of more up to date.
And how much of a problem
But they have to manage the battery, and that is what a lot of what the racers don't like. Verstappen definitely doesn't like it. He said that's not F1.
Yeah, I mean, how much... Oh, we're out of time. Jackie, thanks very much indeed. We'll see you in the next hour.
We'll be right back.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it. As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Very good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Jones and Frost.
With Anna and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Here's what we've got for you.
Donald Trump says negotiations with Iran are going extremely well, even as he considers seizing the country's oil.
The Prime Minister holds talks with fuel bosses as supply fears grow over the ongoing blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
Farmers warn of the looming spectre of food shortages if the strait remains closed.
Also this hour, reports that Australia's most wanted fugitive has been shot dead by police after a 7-month manhunt.
3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition.
And space, the countdown is on to the first manned mission to the moon in more than 5 decades.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us. So the war in the Middle East continues to escalate, and there's a real sense of crisis today. Oil prices have again surged above $115 a barrel as Iran's stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz remains. Well, the Prime Minister is holding roundtable talks later on this morning here with energy and shipping bosses to discuss the crisis. And there are warnings from the food industry about shortages due to the blockade.
Wider tensions in the region are intensifying as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces an expansion of his invasion of southern Lebanon. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says his team are negotiating extremely well with Tehran and is confident a ceasefire deal could be reached soon. The US President also told the Financial Times, though, he's considering seizing Iran's oil, a move which could imply he's planning to take Kharg Island in the north of the Persian Gulf. Here's what President Trump had to say overnight.
We are negotiating with them directly and indirectly. We have emissaries, but we also are dealing directly. And as you know, they've agreed to send 8 boats 2 days ago, and then they added another 2, so it was 10 boats. And now today they gave us as a tribute, I don't know, I can't define it exactly, but they gave us, I think out of a sign of respect, 20 boats of oil, big boats of oil, going through the Hormuz Strait. And that's taking place starting tomorrow morning. Over the next couple of days, a lot of boats. And I would only say that we're doing extremely well in that negotiation, but you never know with Iran because we negotiate with them and then we always have to blow them up.
Well, despite Donald Trump's confidence about ceasefire talks, Iran has announced that it'll be targeting the private homes of US and Israeli officials in the Middle East. It's a move they say is retaliation for US and Israeli attacks on residential areas.
In light of the malicious actions and terrorist measures of the American Zionist enemies and their targeting of residential homes of the Iranian people in various cities, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran will, in retaliatory action, target the residences of American and Zionist regime commanders and political officials in the region and in the occupied territories.
Well, in the wider region, a UN peacekeeper has been killed in Lebanon. The UN says one other peacekeeper was also critically injured in an explosion in the south of the country. It's not yet known where it was launched from, but the United Nations interim force in Lebanon is investigating and says deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law. Here's an update for us from Sky's Sally Lockwood in Dubai.
It feels like very little has changed here. We are more than 4 weeks into a war that the UAE never wanted. And yesterday, we had our heaviest day of bombardment in a long time. And you just need to look at the news coming out of other countries, such as Kuwait this morning, reporting an attack on their energy infrastructure and a desalination plant, which, of course, is extremely concerning because this region is extremely reliant on desalination plants for drinking water, and Iran has threatened to target those if America goes after their power plants, as Donald Trump has been threatening. We've also, of course, seen the Houthis in Yemen joining this war over the weekend, attacking Israel. And there's a lot of concern that they could exacerbate the economic situation when it comes to commercial shipping, disrupting shipping in the Red Sea, as well as what we're already seeing here in the Strait of Hormuz. So, yes, it does feel that potentially this is moving in an escalatory trajectory, because as well as the rhetoric that you're hearing coming out of Washington, no matter how much Donald Trump tries to talk up indirect and direct talks with the Iranians, he's also saying, you know, in the same breath that he could take their oil facilities on Kharg Island, which would be extremely escalatory, and it's very inflammatory in terms of rhetoric. So, you know, we've got that on the one hand, and then we've also got the troop movements. So 3,500 Marines and sailors have now made their way here to the region from the Sea of Japan. Another 2,500 Marines are on their way. The 82nd Airborne Division are being deployed here, paratroopers. And we understand the Pentagon is also considering deploying 10,000 ground troops. And Iran has come out and said, well, if you do that, we'll be ready for you. If you try and start a ground offensive here, whether it's on, you know, islands between here and Iran or on the Iranian mainland, which we think is potentially less likely, Iran has said, you know, we're ready for you. Iran always responds with a retaliatory threat any time there's any sort of escalation by America or by Israel. We've seen a university hit in Tehran over the weekend, and Iran has responded saying, OK, we're now going to target American universities in the region. And, you know, there's a lot of concern. There are a lot of American-affiliated universities, including one here in Dubai. And I've heard from a staff member there who said, you know, we were due to return to in-person learning this week. That's no longer happening. We're working from home. You know, these are very real consequences for people living and working in this region. Every time there's some sort of inflammatory statement or escalatory attack against Iran. And I think we're just going to have to wait and see. As I've been saying to you before, Will, it very much feels like we're holding our breath. It doesn't feel like the war is moving in the right direction.
So what does all of this mean for oil prices? Well, they're up. They're up again this morning by about 3%. Brent, the international gauge, is at $116. And if we just rewind the clock by 7 days, this time last Monday morning, we were at $114. And then we got that infamous post from President Trump on Truth Social to say that peace talks were beginning, to give everyone the hope that this war might be closer to the end than the beginning. And that led to a pretty sharp sell-off in oil prices. Brent came back down to about $100 a barrel of oil. Since then, though, of course, belief that these peace talks will really yield anything has started to slip. And really late last week, we saw a significant pickup again. Questions over the weekend. How would we open this Monday morning? Well, we've opened higher to the tune of 3% to a level of $116 per barrel of oil. Let's just zoom out and look at the 5-year chart just to give you some context. Of course, sharply higher since the start of the war, as we well know, but also now on oil, not gas, looking at levels we haven't seen since the Russia invasion of Ukraine, where we did get briefly higher, but only over, of course, about a month or so than that. But we're essentially at a 3.5-4-year high nearly for oil prices, levels not seen since that particular conflict. Now, British borrowing costs have been very much affected by all of this. And on Friday, we had another torrid day for borrowing costs that saw the 10-year yield jump to 5%. We came back down again a little bit over the course of last week, but we've been around that level. And we opened this morning at 4.96%. So I think after such a torrid day on Friday, the chance is probably relatively relieved that we're not seeing it pick up again, given the oil prices are up again. But nonetheless, this level, just below 5% for the 10-year, is an 18-year high. It's a high not seen since the global financial crisis, since 2008. It gives you a context of quite how much we have been affected here in this country by this crisis. Quick final chart for you. This is a snapshot of the pressure that the President of the United States might be feeling. This is a chart of the NASDAQ 100 stock index. All the big tech stocks have done so well in recent years for the United States. And it's down into what's now called correction territory. It's down 10% from its recent peak. Its recent peak was in October, and we are down, in fact, 12.5% from that level now. But even though that's not a great headline that the president got on Friday afternoon when it fell into that correction territory level, I mean, let's look at it. It's not that much of a decline. Certainly not like that steep increase in British borrowing costs. You're talking about, you know, losing 12% of your value over the course of a couple of months. It's not as steep as we saw last April. This was when President Trump announced those tariffs on everyone, Liberation Day as it became known as. We fell 11% in 2 days versus 12% over a couple of months, and we fell 19% peak to trough over the course of about a week or so. And that, of course, did pressure President Trump to change course with his policy, and he started to loosen a lot of those tariffs he'd imposed on everyone. He's starting to get bad headlines on the US stock market, starting to feel it a bit, but not yet as pronounced as what was sufficient last April for him to change course.
Well, those rising oil prices are definitely focusing minds in government. Later on this morning, Keir Starmer is hosting a roundtable of fuel industry leaders at Downing Street. There are also leaders from energy, shipping, financial and insurance sectors all going to be in attendance to discuss how to limit the impact of the oil price rises. Our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, is here. Lucy, so tell us what this meeting is all about. Is it about shaping policy, do you think, or about reassuring people that they're aware of the problems?
I think it's probably a bit of both. We talk about optics a lot in politics, don't we? You know, this is the beginning of parliamentary recess. MPs are back in their constituencies. I think it's partly the government trying to say, we are constantly monitoring this situation, how it's impacting you and the cost of living. But it's also the government. We've seen it before with petrol bosses. I think they are trying to say to energy bosses, this is partly your problem to deal with. You need to be making sure that customers are getting a fair price, whether it's at the petrol pumps or whether it's in the supermarkets. We do know, though, that the government is looking at, you know, these emergency scenarios where perhaps when the price cap is reset at the end of June, they will have to step in. We know, and they've made it very clear, that it won't be for everybody, like we saw when Russia invaded Ukraine. It would be means tested. But for the time being, I think the government is trying to hold off from making any big financial decisions, in public at least, and they're trying to kind of show that they are taking leadership over this situation.
It's interesting as well hearing what level they may or may not step in at. That was something I was picking up quite a lot with Emma Reynolds. And we're still a long way from the £2,500 of annual energy costs that led to the government to step in last time. And one does just wonder what level they'll have to step in at this time around. And I guess that's one of the huge unknowns at this stage.
Yeah, and that's what will be really difficult. It's obviously not a similar situation, but when we saw the government, that hugely controversial decision over the winter fuel cap, we saw real arguments about where the threshold was set, where they decided to pull that support and where they decided to offer it. They have made it very clear it will not be universal. It was £40 billion when Russia invaded Ukraine. The government isn't in a situation where it could even afford to do that, even if it wanted to. So what we do know is that there is the Treasury now has data which might help it work out who to target support at if it needs to be introduced at some point. But yeah, it's going to be a political argument, I would say.
And Wilf did an interview this morning with Emma Reynolds from the government, of course, and the message seemed to be keep calm and carry on, didn't it?
Yeah, that's the tightrope for the government at the moment. They are saying keep calm and carry on. Obviously, there are concerns. Let's just listen to what Emma Reynolds said about food prices.
Well, look, we are not asking people to ration when it comes to food. Supply of food is as normal, just as the supply of petrol is. So, no, we're not asking people to change their behaviour. Obviously, if we did see further increases in energy prices, that has an impact. That could have an impact on food inflation. That's what we saw with the Ukraine conflict. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that. We're not complacent about any of these things. I just wanted to reassure you.
Emma Reynolds mentioning very much what Bridget Phillipson told Trevor Phillips yesterday on Sky. Keep calm and carry on. Keep filling up at the pumps. Don't try and buy loads of food in the supermarkets. But they are clearly very concerned about this, so that they're monitoring the situation. You know, we listen closely to government ministers' language, don't we? And I would say there are concerns behind the scenes about this, warnings that the government is going to have to intervene in some way. But at the moment, trying to reassure people that they should carry on as normal.
Lucy Christoph, thank you. Now, a fugitive gunman who has been on the run for more than 6 months in Australia is believed to have been shot dead by police.
Yeah, this is Desi Freeman, who allegedly killed 2 police officers in the state of Victoria last August before fleeing into bushland, leading to a major manhunt. Police gave this update a bit earlier.
The very first people to be made aware of the outcome of this operation with the families of the officers tragically killed on the 26th of August and all of the members that were involved on that day. What I can say, should it be confirmed that the deceased is Freeman, this brings closure to what was a tragic and terrible event. It did result from a standoff, the deployment of tactics. He then exited the building. There was an opportunity for him to surrender peacefully, which he did not.
Well, earlier we spoke to 10 News Australia reporter Harvey Biggs, who's in north-east Victoria, not far from where the shootout took place.
Good morning, Anna and Wilfred. Yeah, it's been a massive story here. 2 police officers killed, and for 7 long months there's been no sighting of the man who did it, Desi Freeman, despite one of the biggest police manhunts in Australian history. Then came a tip-off around a week ago that he was at a bush property, a remote bush property at a town called Walwa, around 2 hours from here. And to give your viewers some context, where I'm here in Popunka is around 3.5 hours north of Melbourne, so Walwa's another 2 hours drive towards Sydney. Now, this morning, police officers moved in at around 5:30 a.m. They made an appeal to Desi Freeman to come out and surrender. That started a negotiation that lasted for 3 hours that ended when Freeman walked out of a shipping container. We're told he was wearing a blanket, and then from there he pulled out a gun, and that's when police fatally shot him. So this is the end of a very dark chapter in here that began 216 days ago, actually in the hills behind me, the remote property where this shooting took place, where 2 police officers were killed.
Right, time to talk to the Conservatives, and delighted to say that joining us now is Claire Coutinho, the Shadow Energy Secretary and Shadow Ministers for Equalities. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Prospects of the conflict calming down, at least judging by the reaction in oil markets, seem to be low. How concerned should people be?
Well, look, I'm very worried about energy bills because we know that people are already struggling, and that's why we've set out plans, a cheap power plan, which would cut the average household bill by £200, and crucially, it wouldn't cost taxpayers a penny. What we know from Labour's plans is what they want to do is another taxpayer bailout, but that would be going to hard-pressed middle-income families, people who are not well off themselves, for another bailout to fund people on welfare without helping those people on, say, £30,000 who are struggling. I think that's the wrong approach.
But separate out the pure cost of the help that you're proposing. What is it?
So our plan is to cut some of the taxes and levies that the government is choosing to impose on energy bills. So we would scrap, for example, VAT for the next few years. And the reason that's important is because it would help those people on middle incomes, as I said, who are not going to get any help under Labour.
What does that cost?
So overall, it costs about £2.2 billion. And what we've done is, instead of saying that we're going to get more tax rises from the taxpayer, we know they're already squeezed, as we've looked for things that we can cut. So our overall policy would save the average household by £200. It would cut electricity costs for business by 20%, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayer a penny.
Do you think it's fair, though, ultimately, given where we are and how tight finances are, for help to be more targeted than to be for everyone?
So you've got 2 options here. You can either spend money, in which case you're going to taxpayers and saying we want to spend money and we're going to do that in a targeted way to help people on welfare, or you can do what we're doing, which is take costs out the system. So we're not asking for any money, we're not asking the taxpayer for a penny, and we've got an approach which takes costs out of the energy system. And the reason that I think that is more fair is because about half of the country are on salaries of, say, £30,000, £40,000, £50,000. Those people are struggling too. They are not going to get any relief from Labour's proposals, but they would get help from ours. And if you look at those people, they're not on welfare, but they are not well off, and they are having a very hard time.
There's obviously more debate, though, about how quickly the revenue-saving measures you outline would yield the results you promise. And, of course, if it's simple efficiencies, then why haven't we done them all before? That always kind of comes back to that. With the benefit of hindsight, would it have been sensible for governments of all persuasions over the last couple of decades to have built much more energy storage capacity so that our reserves of gas and oil were much higher?
So if you look at gas, unlike lots of other countries in Europe, we get about 50% of our supply from the North Sea. Now, that is storage which is free. It's something which Germany, for example, doesn't have access to. So instead of building expensive storage, you could use the storage which is free under the North Sea. Now, in the years ahead, if the North Sea declines, and we know that Labour's plans are causing a much faster decline in the North Sea, we're losing thousands and thousands of jobs at the moment, you will need to build gas storage because we are going to have to import more from abroad. But rather than do that, our plan is to drill more in the North Sea, make the most of our own, and make the most of the free gas storage which we have, which is our reserves in the North Sea.
I mean, on one level, that's an acknowledgement that we should have built more storage, clearly, even if it's extracted from close to home and we control it. It's not stored and ready to use. It's quite a process.
It does get piped straight into the UK, so you can use it when you need it.
But it's not stored and immediately ready to use. But at the power plants, on the more drilling in the North Sea, how quickly do you think we could suddenly have a meaningful growth in our supply? This is, it's fair to say, something that has a years of lead time, not months.
So there are two fields, Rosebank and Jackdaw, which at the moment are sat on Ed Miliband's desk. He has not signed them off. We do not know why. And those two fields could be up and running in time for winter. And Jackdaw, for example, could provide about 5% of the UK's gas supply. So this is a really meaningful difference. In the long run, you could have billions more.
5% cumulatively over its life.
5% of the UK gas supply every year. It's a lot of gas that
but
you've
not
got
by
in
Christmas
Jackdaw.
time.
So you can have it up and running by Christmas, and it would be pumping gas to heat enough gas for 1.6 million homes, and you could do that up and running for Christmas per year. Now, I think the reason that that's important...
It could, by Christmas time, supply enough gas for
1.6 million homes.
Every single year throughout, going forward.
Yes, I think obviously you have to look at the
I think that includes cumulatively how much gas could be produced.
It could be up and running by Christmas, and that would be 1.6 million homes it could heat by Christmas. So this is a gas field which is ready to go, which the company has been investing in, and the reason that it's not being used is because Ed Miliband has not signed it off. So it could supply enough gas for 1.6 million homes by this winter. I know that you find that hard to believe, and that's because why would you have not signed that off? It completely is illogical during the times of an energy crisis to not be making the most of fields like that.
Because it's a clear manifesto pledge. That's why they haven't done so. Even if the facts change, perhaps they should reconsider things. Just to finish on the local elections, obviously there's a lot of focus on whether the government will struggle relative to how they did in the 2024 general election. Also questions about how well the Conservatives will do. Is there a level of support if you fall below that threshold that means you have to reconsider the leadership of the party at the moment, below 15% or so?
No, look, I think Kemi Badenoch is doing an incredibly good job. She is setting out a strong stall for the Conservatives, which is the only party that is talking about the economy in a credible way, the only party that wants both a strong economy and a strong borders. Of course, locals, you can have very difficult times. We lost an election very recently. That can make politics generally hard because you have to earn the right to be listened to again. But Kemi is doing that hard work. We know, for example, that she is actually the most popular leader in the country. I think to achieve that in 2 years is incredibly successful, and she's done that by telling the truth, saying hard things about our own party as well as about the current situation that you've got in the country. And I think credit to her, she has built up a reputation for someone who is speaking frankly, addressing some of the key issues that we have, particularly around the economy, because we know that people are struggling. And if you look at our energy policy, what we want to do is bring common sense back to the energy arena, make the most of our own resources, and also cut bills for people who are struggling without burdening the taxpayer again. That is exactly the kind of approach that we're taking across the piece, and I hope that we can then build that trust back in the Conservatives again.
We shall see how the locals go for all parties. Claire Coutinho, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
I think we're going to be talking about energy an awful lot in our political conversations over the next few weeks, aren't we? As everyone wrestles with the prospect of rising prices. And it's something we're going to be talking about in a moment as well with Craig Beaumont. He's Executive Director of the Federation of Small Businesses, who are also raising the fact that it's a new financial year coming in, and he says that'll bring an increase to staffing costs.
the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. We've been talking, of course, about the impact of the war on various energy input costs, but the consequences could stretch further than that.
Yes, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has directly impacted the global supply of fertiliser and gas, which food producers and farmers warn is impacting supply. They've been speaking to our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, and are warning that rising costs will soon have to be passed on to consumers.
Come on, up you get.
This spring, the most sought-after commodity in agriculture isn't sunshine or rain. It's in these tanks. The start of the growing season brings a steady stream of tankers to Brianflow's Great Yarmouth terminal. They're loading liquid nitrogen to spray on crops across the country. Thanks to the war, they may be spreading food inflation too.
In these tanks is liquid fertiliser. It's come from natural gas, turned into ammonia, and from ammonia into nitric acid and urea.
Fertiliser prices have risen because it's an energy product. The price of natural gas has skyrocketed and Gulf production, normally a third of global supply, is stranded.
It's a really serious situation. In some respects, it's worse than it was 4 years ago in the Ukrainian situation. And we all know what happened 6 months later. There was 10% inflation, and that knocked the government right back.
Those white sacks are full of urea. It's a crucial ingredient in fertiliser. Since the war began, each 1 tonne bag has almost doubled in value from around $300 to more than $600. And it's happened at precisely the worst moment. In Britain and across Europe, it is the growing season. Lovely spring day.
Gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah. 150 miles west in the Cotswolds, beef farmer David Barton is already counting the cost. It's peak calving season and his heifers are enjoying the last of the winter feed stock.
Traditionally, livestock farmers tend to buy it in the spring. That had gone from about £370 a tonne for the compound that I buy to £479. I ordered it, I got a price on a day, I ordered it in that afternoon. The following day I was told it's gone up £20 a tonne.
And what difference will the fertiliser make to the kind of yield?
Oh, if I didn't put any on, it would be half the yield.
It's about 70 miles.
70 miles of tomatoes. That's incredible. In the glasshouses of the Lee Valley, north of London, the first crop of sweet peppers will be picked this week. The cherry tomatoes will follow in mid-April. An early summer made possible only by gas-fired heating and fertiliser.
The price of that gas has gone up 92% in 4 weeks, which is absolutely staggering.
If the prices stay where they are...
Disaster. And that is not only for this organisation, but every organisation that's involved in producing food.
For now, farmers and growers are bearing the brunt of the energy price spike, their narrow margins squeezed even tighter. If the war continues, by the time this summer's crops are harvested, consumers will be counting the cost too.
Well, energy costs are going to cause headaches for businesses. On top of that, minimum wage rises and the expansion of statutory sick pay is going to affect small businesses. That's what the groups who represent them are saying. And one of them is here with us, Craig Beaumont, who represents Federation of Small Businesses, you're Executive Director of it. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much. Let's start with the issue of energy prices and the prospect of them going higher off the back of higher oil prices. How much of a concern is that for small businesses?
It's a huge concern. I think it's happening in two different ways as well, because in April we have a rise in the standing charges hitting small businesses anyway, up to 44%, we think, to an average small business. So if you're a restaurant with 40,000 kilowatt per hour kind of usage, your bill is going to go up, and up significantly. And that's before the crisis. And we've already seen energy unit costs going up as well, starting. So if you've not fixed, you'll be feeling that right now. But even if you are fixed, both these two things mean that your bill can be reopened. So I think there's going to be a bit of unpleasantness hitting small businesses from April, so from this week.
Because is there an energy price cap equivalent for small businesses?
No, we are not. We do not have access to a cap. So we've already seen that increase kind of go. We haven't got the protection until July. There's loads of other protections as well. So we're seeing energy suppliers ask for upfront deposits. So you'd have to pay for a quarter or even sometimes a year in advance because the energy supplier is worried the small business may not have cash towards the end. So you see this kind of picture of the economy not doing very well and everyone trying to contain their own risk by passing it on to someone else. And we're seeing that a lot in the energy market.
Yeah, and I guess petrol prices going up is going to affect the transportation of goods as well, and that will affect businesses as well. So presumably, are you saying that consumers are going to have to expect higher prices?
It's quite hard to see a scenario without rising prices. So diesel in particular for small businesses, that use vans to get around, we estimated that will increase their cost at a moment right now by about 15%. So that has to come out somewhere. So if you're a small business owner, you're looking at employment costs, you're looking at energy costs, looking at some other tax changes. We're trying to describe this as a cost stack that is hitting small businesses in lots of different ways from April. And that means that either prices will rise or you've got to cut costs. Those are your only two ways, really. You could borrow money, but actually leveraging what you've got to borrow more money when you're not quite sure you'll pay it is quite difficult.
Not least when borrowing costs are going up. I mean, you mentioned April as key because this is when some other changes were due to come in anyway. Obviously, it's the new tax year. Talk us through the ones that are most relevant for small businesses.
Well, the first thing is from Wednesday, lots of changes happened to the national minimum wage and national living wage. So if you're employing, let's say, 4 or 5 people on young people on the national minimum wage, which is for 18 to 22-year-olds, that goes up by 26% since April last year, which basically means the same money that you used to pay for 5 people will now pay for 4. And then if you're employing adults, it probably the kind of cut-over point of the increase in cost about 10 or 11 people. So that's an extra missing person that cost of that person is now being given over to the Treasury in the main through the increase in the national living wage and the tax revenues that come from it. So employing people, using energy, having your business rates built, all these things suddenly make it more expensive to run a business in the UK. And that's the kind of consequence from all these kind of policy decisions we're seeing. And if you want to get growth in jobs or you want to expand our population of small businesses in this country, which the government wants to do, we really need to address that.
But the government also wants to be fair to workers, don't they? And the Chancellor defends the rise in the minimum wage, saying it's the low pay being properly rewarded. And unions as well say that competitive wages are needed if you're going to keep and attract staff.
So I wouldn't disagree with any word of that. I think our point is that these other costs are coming as well. So you're making it harder for the business to afford. Small businesses want to pay more. The sick pay changes coming on top of business rates and energy and the living wage. It all adds up to a picture of being more expensive. So if there was some help on these other costs, then that would help us afford the higher pay. But don't forget that a lot of that higher pay goes to the Treasury. It doesn't go to the individual. It goes off in something called the jobs tax, employer national insurance, which is already at an increased level after the first budget under the Labour government.
Dividend tax is changing as well?
Yeah, so you'll pay 2% more than you pay at the moment. So
that seems like a reasonable increase, or is it not?
Well, a dividends tax, people think it's about people with investments and shares and things like this, but actually a small business owner often pays themselves in a combination of PAYE and dividends. So suddenly, even if you make a bit of money, you won't be able to pay yourself quite so easily. So you've made your profits, you've paid your taxes, and then you have to pay it another time. So it all kind of adds up to this picture, and that's really what we're saying. There are some good things. I don't want to come out on this morning and be all depressed. There are some good things coming from this government. The late payments legislation coming is really good. The money that helps us recruit an apprentice is really good. So we're starting to see some stuff from the government, but it hasn't really cracked this big nut on costs.
OK, well, Craig Beaumont, we really appreciate you coming in and telling us a little bit about some of the strains on small businesses. Thanks for coming in.
Now, up next, we're going to chat with retired Navy Commander Tom Sharp about the ships tied to Russia's shadow fleet moving through UK waters. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Reports suggest that dozens of sanctioned oil tankers linked to Russia's so-called shadow fleet have sailed through UK waters this year, with some estimates suggesting the real number could be far higher. Former Royal Navy commanders say Britain must be more targeted in stopping vessels suspected of breaching sanctions, and that in some cases special forces could be used to seize tankers if armed guards are on board. Let's discuss all of this with retired Navy Commander Tom Sharp. What we missed out as well in that is that, crucially, of course, permissions changed last week as to whether the Navy could intercept these types of ships. What is it going to take to intercept a non-military ship? Is it an easy thing for our Navy to do?
It's relatively easy. I mean, nothing at sea is ever particularly easy. You're still flying helicopters over the water, putting them onto a moving platform who may not want you on board. I mean, we can come back to that. But in terms of the straightforward boarding, putting people on board and taking and seizing a ship, for our Special Forces and our Royal Marines, that's not the most complex thing they'll be asked to do.
What is the most complex thing they'll be asked to do?
Well, it gets much, much harder if it becomes an opposed boarding. So there's layers of boarding. There's compliant, where they let you on board. There's non-compliant, where they become difficult. And then there's opposed, where they might shoot back. Now you're into very high-intensity Special Forces, take down large numbers, and so on.
And if we're talking about the shadow fleet, which is essentially ways in which Russia is moving oil around and evading sanctions, presumably they're not going to welcome British forces descending onto their ship. So does that make it a perilous expedition?
They'll be non-compliant. I think we can guarantee that. They won't want them on board, as you say. They might manoeuvre to make it more difficult, although they're big ships. So really, you know, they're not very well run. They're very old. They're not insured. This is part of the problem. But if they start shooting back or even wave a gun around, I mean, that's all it takes. Someone out on the bridge wing with a rifle, and suddenly the whole landscape changes. And now it's the pool and the SBS, and there's elements of the SAS that can do it too. And you're into large numbers of people, which is why I think even though permissions were given a couple of days ago, we haven't seen this happen yet.
Would we see it through? I mean, I think with everything, it's so important not to say you'll do something and not, but do you get the sense that all of your former colleagues are ready for this?
They absolutely are, from a military perspective, but of course it's much broader than that because it's constabulary too. You need to take these ships in somewhere, so you've got to find a safe place for them, you've got to inspect them, and perhaps even take that court to crew. And so there's a whole tale of practicality beyond the boarding itself. Like I said, in some ways the boarding is the easy bit. Now that we've got permissions, finally, I mean, that took a while. Everybody else got there first.
What held it up?
It's a maritime legal discussion, which, as ever, can go both ways. And we default to the safe setting as a matter of course, as a country, as a government. We wring our hands and we obfuscate and we fret, where other countries have just gone, do you know what, there's a loophole there, let's get in there. So I'm not saying we abandon the laws altogether, but we've got to get better at exploiting our own grey zone, because that's what they're doing to us.
Is there a hope that just by saying we're giving permission, it will deter ships from going through the channel?
Yeah, and I think we've already seen that. We've seen ships do U-turns already. We've seen ships going the long way around. Now, that was happening anyway, but that's good. This imposes cost. And if Putin thinks I might need to send an escort, a warship with a particular cargo because it's valuable, that's a good thing. This is us imposing cost on him. The actual cost of the oil we're going to seize and detain, should we ever do that, isn't really the factor here. It's more the sort of deterrent picture that we're presenting.
Do you think, just hearing you sort of talk through the processes that it's taken to get here and then the positive effect it's already... Have we just been far too weak from day one on this?
Yeah, we've been really slow. Now, there's a line here. You can't just tear up the rule book. We've seen elements of that with America, perhaps, or Venezuela and the narco boats. That was uncomfortable. You know, I still think there has to be a framework here. But we're very poor at exploiting the edges of that. And the grey zone activities, the hybrid activities, whatever you want to call them, that Russia does to us, are expert at probing our weakness in this regard. So this slight turning of the screw is good news, and I don't think it's any coincidence it's happened after a month of pretty poor maritime performance.
You say it's a slight turning of the screw, but as you say, other countries have done it. I've got a list here: US, France, Belgium, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Italy, Norway, Latvia. But the ships are at sea. So is it really a deterrent?
No, it doesn't stop them, but it helps. I mean, this is $100 billion into Putin's war chest a year. It's massive. It's a massive trade. It's being helped to an extent by what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now. There's temporary sanctions relief and waivers to Russian oil already at sea. So they you know, every time the price of oil goes up, they're laughing, they're winning. So anything that helps deter or detain or seize that is good news, even if it's not going to be the whole deal.
Just finally, stepping back from everything, you mentioned there it's been a poor month on the maritime side for us as a country. How poor has it been? And as a retired Navy commander, I mean, give us a snapshot of where our Navy is today compared to where it should be.
It's been a really tough month to commentate on as a proud Navy guy, watching us unable to sail a single ship. Now, this is a combination of two things, one of which is I'm calling it the 30-year problem. The governments of both colours since 1990 essentially neglecting defence, because it's tomorrow's problem. Well, that's now today. We're here, and we're wafer thin across the entire piece of defence. But I've never seen it represented so clearly as our inability to deploy one ship to protect a sovereign base. And then the second problem is that the decision-making that led us there was very, very slow. We should have had that destroyer out of the door weeks, if not months ago, when it became obvious this requirement was building. But a bit like the Dark Fleet, we're just a bit slow and a bit timid, and we sort of wring our hands and we're not quite sure. So yeah, it's been a bad month, I think, and I think that's why the Dark Fleet thing has just changed up a gear.
Tom Sharp, thanks for joining us. Really interesting.
Thanks for coming in. Thank you.
As you can see, Jackie is here because we can talk about the sport, and it's a bit of a sort of merry-go-round in the managerial hot seats.
Well, at Tottenham, Igor Tudor, which was kind of, we knew it was coming. It was just a question of when he would be sacked. It was mutual consent, it always is. That happened yesterday afternoon. So Tottenham have got 7 games, not just to save their season, but to save their Premier League status. So who comes in to do that rescue job? Will it be Roberto De Zerbi? We'll be talking about him. And also Formula One. Has it become too dangerous? Do they need to make changes to the rules after a huge crash yesterday at Suzuka?
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
So Jackie's here with all sport and another Premier League sacking, Jackie.
Yes, so that happened yesterday. Igor Tudor at Spurs. I think everyone thought this is coming, just a question of when, after they lost 3-0 to Nottingham Forest, and they're 1 point above the relegation zone. And it's not a good place for them to be in, because by the time they next play, after the international break, it's the 12th of April. And by that point, they could already be in the relegation places, because West Ham, who are below them, could have won their match and leapfrogged them. So not a great situation for Spurs to be in. So he's gone. Who do you get in next? You've got 7 games to save your season. You've got 7 games to save Spurs' Premier League status. And, if they were to go down, that would be one of the greatest shocks, I think maybe even the greatest shock in Premier League history. So Roberto De Zerbi seems to be the name that everyone has been talking about since things moved on from the, massive collection of names that we had last night and this morning. Sky in Italy have confirmed in the last hour that he is open to talks with Spurs. There was a suspicion he might not want to be bothered with it until the end of the season, till he knew whether they were in the Championship or in the Premier League. But according to our sources in Italy, one of the reporters there has spoken to his representatives. He is open to talks, and that is all I can tell you about that. There are more questions in the process of being answered, but I can't talk about them. If you want to know about him, interesting character, managed Shakhtar Donetsk quite successfully until the outbreak of the war, and then the season was suspended, so he left there. He went to Brighton in 2022. In the first season in charge at Brighton, he got them into Europe, which was an incredible achievement for a Brighton manager. He'd replaced Graham Potter. Then he left because he didn't really agree with their transfer policy. I think he wanted more investment and it wasn't forthcoming. So, mutual consent, he left there. And then he moved on to Marseille. And in the first season there, he got them to second place in the league. And then that sort of petered out after a couple of years because of bad results. So, interesting character.
But they're still fourth. But he's left Marseille a month ago, which I completely missed.
Yeah, there was a couple of results that were not good enough. Anyway, I wasn't there. I don't know the ins and outs, but exactly why I left. But he's around.
That's been a potential candidate for Manchester United, even Liverpool and others.
We can see from that CV. It's a pretty
great.
It's like you go in and you do something really excellent in your first year in charge, and that's kind of exactly what Spurs need. So
great coup for a relegation team.
It will be interesting to see, what his demands are. Can they match it? Will he take it? How desperate are they to match his demands? Because there are other names who are free, which have been talked about a lot, which you would like. Harry Redknapp.
I just love Harry.
Just because, I mean, everybody loves Harry. Yeah. How can you not like Harry?
I think it'd be a great choice.
But he retired.
It's hard to take you seriously when you're an Arsenal fan, though.
Well, no, do you know what I'm enjoying?
I don't know whether you're...
This time last week, we had to talk for about 10 minutes every hour about Arsenal losing the Carabao Cup final. So it's quite nice to switch the focus.
Talk about someone else's woes.
Yeah. So you want Harry because you think it won't work, and then
I want Harry because I love Harry.
As an Arsenal fan, that's kind of what you want.
No, I think if it was Harry, my loyalties would then be split because I'd want him personally to do well.
Is he your godfather?
He's not my godfather. There's no personal connection at all. I just like him.
I think we should move on to Formula 1. I don't know if you watched the Suzuka Grand Prix yesterday. It was won by Kimi Antonelli, who was 19, is now leading the championship. He's the first teenager to do that, and he couldn't even celebrate with champagne because he's underage in Japan. So, and he did have a bit of fortune in that race because there was a crash, there was a safety car, and he could then pit during the safety car, which meant he went back to the top of the standings. He didn't lose any time on his pit stop, which benefited him. Therefore, he won. But great drive nonetheless. The crash itself was quite spectacular. It was Ollie Behrman. I think we've got a look at it now. 191 miles an hour.
Terrifying.
It was terrifying, and he walked away limping, and he had to be helped off the track. There you can see with stewards. He was going very fast. He said, I was going about 30 miles an hour faster than the car in front of me, which was the Alpine. And it's all to do with these new setups in the cars. It's 50-50 between battery, electric, and a combustion engine. And they have to manage these electric batteries in terms of recharging them during the race, with how they drive. It's quite complicated, and it is very different. And he said, there are times when your car is going, it has recharged, you are on boost, you are going a lot faster than the car in front that may be sort of powering down, as it were. And he had to take evasive action and ended up in a car crash. And I think drivers have been warning of this the whole time. Max Verstappen is not enjoying this hybrid and how you have to manage an electrical battery while you're in a race. He said it's not F1, you can't go full throttle when you're racing. It's not really racing. A lot of it's just managing. You do an overtake and then you run out of power and someone then re-overtakes you. And he said, I am not enjoying this. I may reevaluate at the end of the season. I may walk away from F1 because I just don't think this is racing. He's got a family now. Would I rather be spending my time with my family and my friends and not just kind of suffering through something I'm not really enjoying?
I wonder if suddenly he was in the best car again, whether he changed his mind.
Well, this is the question, and he was asked that question, and he said, no, I know that I can't win all the time. If I'm in P7 or P8, You know, I'm fine with that. I'm just not enjoying this setup where you have to... He said it's like Formula E. Or in fact, he compared it to Mario Kart. It's not real. It's not racing.
He does make some legit points. It'd be a more powerful complaint if he was winning races than not.
Well, they've got a gap now. You know, there's no F1 for the whole of the next month. They've got all the other teams have got time to change their cars. So he may suddenly have a really good car when he comes back.
Jackie, great stuff.
Thanks so very much indeed, Jackie. Thank you.
Sky News today. Up next after this short break. Don't go anywhere. Anna and I will be back tomorrow.
We will
Thanks for
indeed.
watching.
See you then.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.